Chapter 671. Qin Hao would never remember wrongly. 600 years ago, one of the three divine guards under Zhan Wu had the surname Wu Lily. No wonder he felt a sense of familiarity when they fought. His primordial qi was as thick as glue. Wu Lilong was obviously Wu Lily's descendant. Before his relationship with Zhan Wu was broken, Qin Hao had taught his subordinate Wu Lily some skills. However, as Dendi, Qin Hao had a high status and did not take Wu Lily seriously. That was why he did not immediately remember. Then, why did Wu Lily's descendant come all the way from the East Continent to Western Liang? What was their purpose? Could it be related to the treasure in front of him? Were they here for the treasure? Qin Hao's thoughts ran fast. In a short moment, he had guessed the answer. They must be here for the treasure. However, when they found out, it was too late. Hai Dafu had taken the lead. Western Liang was far from the East Continent, and there was a vast sea in between. The three of them knew that a strong dragon could not suppress a snake in its own territory. They did not dare to fight head-on because they were afraid of Hai Dafu's strength. If they fought, Yilong Yuan would be alerted. According to this inference, it was not difficult to understand why Jin Yuxuan would interfere and sponsor Hai Dafu to dig for the treasure. Wu Lilong and the other two must have secretly found Jin Yuxuan and instigated him. Then, what was the treasure underground? Why did it attract Zhan Wu's subordinates from the East Continent? Qin Hao was suddenly filled with great curiosity. Since they're here, I can't let them stay. He sneered in his heart. Wu Lilong and the others hid their identities as martial artists from the East Continent. Even if they racked their brains, they would not know that Qin Hao was the emperor of the East Continent from 600 years ago. Hey, Qin boy, we've arranged everything here. Why are you in a daze? Hurry up and count our men. At this time, Jin Yuxuan's dissatisfied grumble came. Qin Hao raised his head and saw the other party pointing at him, indicating for Qin Hao to hurry up and go on the expedition. Fourth Master, you make the arrangements. The fewer people that go in, the better. Qin Hao looked at Hai Laosi. In fact, Qin Hao wanted to say that he alone was enough. After all, Wu Lilang and the other two would not be able to come out alive this time. Of course, including Jin Yuxuan's men, not even a blade of grass would survive. Qin Hao had 100 ways to kill this group of people. The fewer, the better? Hai Laosi was startled, and his face was filled with embarrassment. In fact, this was the first time he had come to the location of the treasure. Before this, he had only heard reports from his subordinate. When he came here today, he felt that the damp air coming from the ground was sinister and terrifying. It might be dangerous. He felt that the current manpower might not be able to guarantee Qin Hao's safety, but Qin Hao just said that the fewer people who went in, the better. Had the young master gone crazy? I think it's better to postpone it for a few days. Don't go down today. Wait for me to write a letter to the Dafu Patriarch and ask him to send a group of King Stage Masters over. Or, you can ask Second Master to come too. Hai Laosi said with a sullen face, imploring. Even if he did not want the treasure, he could not let Qin Hao lose a single hair. The Second Master, he was referring to, was naturally the old demon. What a coward! You must go down today. If you don't, the Jin Family Trading Company will not be polite. Jin Yuxuan glared at Hai Laosi with disdain. Then, he waved his hand and gestured for people to enter the cave. Wait! Qin Hao said and looked at Hai Laosi. Fourth Master, don't worry. I won't be in danger. Besides, Lord Jin's 3 masters are here. Ha, that's right. With Jin Yuxuan here, your young master Qin Hao won't lose a single hair. Jin Yuxuan was suddenly praised by Qin Hao. He patted his chest happily and promised, feeling very proud. This. Hai Laosi was even more worried. It was fine if Qin Hao did not mention the 3 black-robed men. Now that he mentioned them, he was even more nervous. Was the young master really stupid? Could the people of Jin Yuxuan be trusted? It was good enough that he did not kill you and take the treasure for himself. What? My words don't count anymore. Qin Hao's face tensed up. He had no choice but to put on his airs. All right. Hai Lao Si did not dare to disobey Qin Hao. In that case, Elder Yang and the other two accompany young Master Qin Hao into the treasure. Yes. The three old men with the word Hai embroidered on their chests accepted the order. These three people had reached the high level of heavenly saint. They were the three strongest people in the Hai family's team. It could be seen how worried Hai Lao Si was about Qin Hao. In this regard, Qin Hao felt a little helpless. He was afraid that after this trip, Elder Yang and the other two would never return. However, Qin Hao could not refuse Hai Lao Si. Otherwise, the other party would not feel at ease letting him enter. He could only pray that Elder Yang and the other two were smart enough. If they were smart enough, they could still protect themselves. Tsk, a bunch of ants. Wu Lilong snorted in disdain. He licked the corner of his mouth excitedly. It seemed that he could not wait to enter the treasure. Men, put down the cages. After the arrangements were made, Hai Lao Si waved his hand. Then, he saw a group of bare-chested burly men, shouting "Hey, hey, hey!" pushing a giant iron cart that was 10 meters tall from afar. A thick log was tied to the front of the iron cart. The log was wrapped with black chains, and there was a cage hanging from it. Obviously, they were going to let people enter the cage and then hang the cage with the chains to put them underground. Are you looking down on the three of us by bringing out this junk? Wu Lilong roared fiercely. A red king-level barrier covered his body. Then, he and the other two black-robed men looked at each other and jumped down. Elder Yang, let's go. Qin Hao was too lazy to increase his yuan qi. He jumped into the pit with his hands behind his back. His body fell in a straight line and was instantly swallowed by the moisture below. Qin Hao's body was made of 10,000 spirits and was immune to poison. Mere moisture was useless. Elder Yang and the other two did not dare to delay. After increasing their saint-level barrier, they followed closely behind Qin Hao. Leader Wu Lilong, wait for me. Jin Yuxuan panicked. He quickly took out a bottle from his chest and poured out a pill of extraordinary quality. He stuffed it into his mouth and stretched his neck. Gulp. He swallowed it. What are you looking at? You bunch of idiots, hurry up and protect me. After eating the poison prevention pill, Jin Yuxuan cursed at the Jin guards beside him. Then, there was a tall and sturdy man. His body was covered with a strong saint-level barrier. He hugged Jin Yuxuan in his arms. He wailed like a ghost and jumped into the pit. Suddenly, a large number of Jin guards jumped in together, like a group of moths flying into a raging fire. The scene was very spectacular. With this jump, all of the Jin Trading Company's men jumped. Only Hai Lao Si, Xiaojun, and about 20 Hai guards were left on the ground. Uncle Si, Brother Qin Hao will definitely return safely, right? Xiaojun hugged Hai Lao Si's waist tightly. Then, he closed his eyes and stretched his head into the pitch-black pit. Then, his eyelids loosened slightly and he glanced at it. This glance was like looking into hell. It made him shiver violently and he immediately retracted his head. Definitely. Young Master will definitely find out what is inside. Chapter 672. After entering the pit, they could not see their surroundings clearly due to the moisture in front of them. Qin Hao fell down at a high speed, as if he had fallen into an abyss. The energy formed under his feet dispersed the moisture in the pit. After a long time, he felt his body stop as if his feet were supported by something. He knew that he had landed underground. The moisture underground is 10 times thicker than above. Everyone, be careful. Qin Hao warned Elder Yang and the other two beside him. Understood. The three of them nodded solemnly. Moisture had the ability to corrode yuan qi. Consumed a lot of yuan qi. Even a saint-level expert could not stay in such a harsh environment for too long. Otherwise, they would be poisoned and most likely die here. What made Elder Yang feel strange was that Qin Hao was not protected by any yuan qi. Yet, he was not affected by the moisture at all. It was both surprising and puzzling. However, they did not have time to think about it because they had reached the entrance of the treasure. In fact, the area they were in was very small. It was not more than 50 meters in length and width. It was impossible to imagine that they had to dig thousands of miles just to open up such a small space underground. Thus, it could be seen how huge and difficult the project was. At this moment, in front of Qin Hao and the others was a huge stone door. A large number of braziers were hung on the stone wall beside the door. The oil in the braziers was very special. It was the blood of demonic beasts and would not be extinguished in the moisture. The flames were strong and lit up the cave. It must be the work of the High family's craftsmen. The stone door blocking Qin Hao was actually a huge piece of stone. Since the craftsmen could not chisel it open, the project had stopped. It indicated that behind the stone was the entrance to the treasure. At this moment, Wu Lily and the other two black-robed men were standing in front of the stone door, trying to figure out how to break it open. "Oh my God, is this stone the legendary Millennium Cold Steel?" Senior Yang walked forward and touched the stone door. Then, he exclaimed in shock. Millennium Cold Steel was an essential material for the creation of the Divine Soldier. It was extremely hard and had a wide range of uses. It could even be used as a supplementary material for divine weapons. The stone in front of them was huge, about 10 feet high. It was unknown how thick it was. It was definitely a treasure. Even the door that blocked the treasure was a supreme treasure. Just how valuable was the treasure inside? This caused everyone to be extremely excited and curious. However, a problem then arose. With such a huge piece of Millennium Cold Steel blocking the entrance, how was it possible to enter? When everyone heard this, their hearts sank. What's the fuss about? 1,000-year cold steel is not a big deal. I can break it with a single palm strike. Most importantly, this big rock is not made of Millennium Cold Steel, but a Millennium Cold Steel King. Wu Lilong shouted sternly. He despised the Xiaoyang people for being ignorant, but there was a hint of helplessness in his tone. Given his cultivation as a one-star Yuan monarch, it was unrealistic for him to break through the 10,000-year-old frosty iron monarch. Heavens, doesn't that mean my golden jade pavilion is going to be rich? Ah! Accompanied by excited howls, Jin Yuxuan's men fell from the sky like piles of dung. As luck would have it, Jin Yuxuan's plump body was lucky enough to sit on Wu Lianglong's head, causing him to cry out in pain and fall to the ground. Furthermore, Black Fierce Wolf was facing down with its back facing up. On the other hand, Jin Yuxuan was lying on the back of the Black Wolf. The two men's strange posture was very indecent. "President Jin, get down quickly!" Wu Lianglang immediately shouted, as if he had been greatly humiliated. "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Jin Yuxuan stood up gracefully and took out a long tobacco pipe. He slowly took a few puffs and turned to look at the stone door with a frown. According to what Commander Wolf said, it is not easy to break through the 10,000-year-old frosty iron monarch. Of course it is not easy. At the very least, the 4 weaklings from the High Family Business Organization do not have the ability to break it. Forgive me for being blunt, but no one, including your subordinates, will be able to break through it. Wu Lianglang said arrogantly and looked at Qin Hao provocatively, as if he was mocking him. He also felt that he was the only one who could break through this world. "How dare you?" Senior Yang shouted. When Qin Hao saw this, he smiled and did not argue with the other party. In fact, given Qin Hao's current cultivation, he was indeed unable to break through it. However, if he used the Great Void Sword, it would consume more energy. However, the 10,000-year-old frosty iron could not withstand a single blow. However, Qin Hao was not prepared to show his trump card. Instead, he said, "Then we will have to trouble the 3 of you to help us break through this door." Sooner or later, he would have to fight with them. Of course, Qin Hao had to hide his strength. He chose to let them show some of their abilities so that he could judge their abilities. How is it? Can Commander Wolf open it? Jin Yuxuan was also concerned about this, so he hurriedly asked. Sorry, I can't. Wu Lianglang shook his head and smiled arrogantly. However, it does not mean that my brother can't. He looked at the black-robed commander and said respectfully, Brother, hurry up and do it. Yes. The black-robed commander nodded. Although he was dissatisfied with Wu Lianglang's rash actions, he actually wanted to see Qin Hao's methods. However, the treasure was their goal in coming to the remote western Liang from the east continent. For this goal, they had lived in western Liang for 10 years. They were looking forward to returning to the east continent and did not want to delay any longer. At this moment, Commander Wu Lianglang made his move. Wu Lida raised his hand and a light bloomed in his palm. A divine spear condensed in his palm. As soon as the spear appeared, everyone felt that it was extraordinary. The tip of the spear actually emitted a golden flame. The flame flickered fiercely and was filled with a huge amount of resentment. It could be seen that it had killed many experts. The sky spear of golden flames. Qin Hao was shocked. This spear was the personal weapon of Tuoba Feihao, one of the 12 fierce generals who guarded the imperial palace of Daqin. It was a rare upper-grade king weapon. Unexpectedly, it had fallen into the hands of Zhan Wu's Wu Li clan. It seems that Tuoba Feihao is doomed. In an instant, Qin Hao guessed the result. General Feihao might have died in battle. However, I will avenge you today. I will also take back the sky spear for you. It does not belong to Zhan Wu's subordinate. Letting out a long sigh, Qin Hao restrained his killing intent and pulled Old Yang and the others back a few steps. The sky extinction spear had the support of Qin Hao's previous life's inscription technique. When it was used, it could summon a tyrannical golden flame, and its lethality was very powerful. Fortunately, the other party had revealed a trump card first. It was a very powerful trump card. If the other party had suddenly used it against Qin Hao in battle, it might have caused a lot of damage. President Jin, I advise you to stay away. I'm going to make a move to avoid accidentally injuring you. Wu Lida said coldly and inadvertently glanced at Qin Hao. It was as if Qin Hao knew that he would launch a special killing move in the next moment and chose to avoid in advance. This kid is very smart. He can't be left alive. Wu Lida muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear. Immediately, his king-level yuan qi flourished. Surging red flames soared above his head, illuminating the underground cavern. The astonishing power shook the ground below as if it would collapse. Jin Yuxuan and the others were so frightened that their faces turned pale. Sky annihilation. With a loud shout, Wu Lida leaped into the air and suddenly thrust the spear in his right hand forward. Boom! The tip of the spear spewed out a blazing golden flame like magma on the 10 millennia cold steel. Kacha! Under the impact of the golden flame, the 10 millennia cold steel cracked into countless spiderweb. It could be seen how terrifying Wu Lida was with the sky annihilation godly spear. 6th tier king level. Qin Hao judged the other party's vitality realm at a glance and could not help but frown. The strongest of the 3 black-robed men was stronger than he had imagined. With Qin Hao's current cultivation, even with the Great Void Godly Sword, he might not be able to kill the other party. This was really a bit unexpected. However, the cracked 10 millennia cold steel did not collapse under Wu Lida's attack. As expected of the cold steel king stone. It took a blow from me and was not destroyed. This makes me feel very embarrassed. However, with one more blow you will definitely be destroyed. After saying this, Wu Lida's cultivation increased again. His vitality became even more turbulent and his cultivation realm soared to the 7th tier king level. This realm was once again beyond Qin Hao's expectations. It had exceeded the level that Qin Hao could match. Break for me. Lida retracted his right hand and stabbed again. Another golden flame spewed out from the tip of the spear. With a rumble, a 2-person tall hole appeared in the cracked 10 millennia cold steel. The inside of the hole was incomparably dark and emitted an ancient aura. The 10 millennia cold steel kingstone was ultimately no match for Lida, who wielded the Sky Annihilation godly spear. At this moment, the stone door was pierced through. Ha ha ha, as expected of Big Brother. The way you use the Sky Annihilation godly spear is getting more and more exquisite. It's good that Tuoba Feihao died. When we return, we will definitely receive the Battle Emperors. Wu Lilong laughed happily. Shut up. Smack. Lida slapped Wu Lilong's face with the back of his hand, slapping the other party's words back into his mouth. He had almost let the good-for-nothing Wu Lilong expose their identity as East Continent warriors. If this spread out, the hermits of Western Liang would definitely not let them leave alive. Especially the Dragon Abyss Emperor. After all, although this treasure was a lost treasure of the East Continent, it was also a great treasure for Western Liang. Obtaining these treasures was enough to raise the strength of an empire. The treasure must not fall into the hands of Yi Longyuan. Humph! Putting away the Sky Annihilation spear, Lida glared at Wu Lilong and wiped the sweat off his head. Clearly, the 2 golden flames of Heaven's annihilation had consumed a lot of his energy. He looked at Jin Yuxuan and said, "President Jin, we can go in now." Lida wasn't sure if the expert who'd brought the treasure here was really dead. If he was still alive, even if he only had a breath left, he could kill the 3 of them like ants. Therefore, it was better to let Jin Yuxuan and the other idiots go in first to explore. Ahahaha, good. Thank you for your help, Commander Lida. I will remember this and will not forget to reward the 3 of you later. Young Master Qin, let's go and see what kind of amazing treasure is inside, so that Hai Dafu won't say that I pocketed it. Jin Yuxuan also sneered eerily and gestured for Qin how to go in first. He also gave a fierce look to his subordinates beside him. Suddenly, all the men of the Jin family trading company laughed strangely. Chapter 673. He didn't know if there was any danger in the cave. After thinking about it, Old Yang decided to go first. Then, I won't stand on ceremony. Qin Hao stopped Old Yang and took the lead into the deep tunnel without a trace of fear. He had just released his mental power to investigate. There were some strange existences inside, but they were not a threat to him. Old Yang and the other 3 high family elders looked at each other and followed closely behind Qin Hao. If anything happened, it would be easier to provide support. Let's go too. Jin Yuxuan smiled, very satisfied. Then, smoking his pipe, he led the others to follow. Including Lida and the other 2, the team formed a long line and was swallowed by the cave in front. After Qin Hao stepped in, he was greeted by the smell of old earth. The humidity in the air seemed to be heavier. For ordinary Yuan practitioners, inhaling such a large amount of moisture was very harmful. Therefore, except for Qin Hao and Jin Yuxuan, everyone behind surged their Yuan Qi shields to filter the moisture in the cave to protect their internal organs. Qin Hao's body was formed from 10,000 spirits and was immune to poison. He didn't need to do anything unnecessary. As for Jin Yuxuan, he was not afraid of the moisture in the cave because he had taken a saint-grade antidote pill in advance. In the eyes of Lida and the other 2, Qin Hao might have also taken some kind of pill, so he didn't need to use Yuan Qi to protect himself. In silence, everyone was very cautious. The team continued to advance along the tunnel that was penetrated by the golden flames of the Sky Extinguisher spear. More than 30 balls of Yuan Qi light illuminated the surroundings. The more Qin Hao walked, the more he felt that the path ahead was getting wider. He didn't know how long he had walked, but based on his pace, Qin Hao felt that he had walked about 2 to 3 miles. He had to admit that the destructive power of Lida's Sky Extinguisher spear was indeed amazing. It was able to penetrate such a long hole in the 10,000-year-old cold iron stone. Then, Qin Hao's footsteps suddenly stopped. He was immediately stunned by the scene in front of him. As far as the eye could see, the space ahead was incomparably grand. The space was far larger than imagined. Everyone felt as if they were in a chaotic universe, incomparably small. But what was truly shocking was the skeletons and weapons that were scattered all over the ground. They were everywhere, too many to count. Rather than a cave, it was more like an ancient battlefield. The strange thing was that there were not many corpses. There were only about a dozen of them, and each of their bones was quite thick. This proved that when these people were alive, their strength was not ordinary. The most important thing was the weapons. The weapons that were stabbed into the ground and scattered around were not damaged or broken. They had not been used in battle at all. All the weapons were surprisingly new. It was as if every weapon and every set of armor had just been forged. Under the illumination of everyone's primordial chi, it emitted a chilling light. Heavens, what is this place? Qin Hao was stunned for a second, but Grandpa Yang was so shocked that he cried out. There were hundreds of thousands of weapons in front of him, and all of them were new. There were sabers, spears, swords, halberds, shields, and arrows. Judging from the light it was emitting, it seemed that the material it was made of was extremely good. Its destructive power was extremely ferocious, and it was likely that it could equip an entire army. More importantly, their weapons and armors were not from Western Liang. In fact, it wasn't even a style from this era. More like a long time ago. Why do I feel that these weapons are so familiar? Qin Hao's head hurt a little. He patted his temple as if he had thought of something, but he couldn't figure it out. His intuition told him that the hundreds of thousands of weapons and armors in front of him were not for ordinary martial artists. They were more like military equipment, and they looked like the military equipment when he was in charge of Daqin 600 years ago. It's them, it's them. Just as Qin Hao was lost in thought, Wu Lilong shouted excitedly. He was so excited that he even knelt on the ground and grabbed a heavy machete worn by heavy infantrymen. He lost his composure and kissed it. Tears flowed from the corner of his eyes. Could it be that the three of you know the origin of these weapons? Grandpa Yang felt that the matter was not simple, so he asked with a straight face. Coincidentally, when his foot landed, Kacha, he stomped on a skeleton on the ground, crushing the skull into pieces. It could be said that he had crushed the bones and scattered the ashes. Impudent! Wu Lida shouted furiously. He turned his head and his eyes shone with the light of a ferocious beast. He slapped Grandpa Yang's face heavily. Slap! This sound was extremely loud. Not only did it stun Grandpa Yang, but it also stunned everyone present. Sir, why are you doing this? Grandpa Yang was slapped for no reason. When he came back to his senses, he couldn't help but glare at the other party. Even if Wu Lida was an expert invited by Jin Yuxuan, this was too unreasonable. There's no reason. I can slap trash like you whenever I want. Everyone, listen up. The bones here are not to be trampled on. If there's a next time, no matter who it is, I'll kill them. Wu Lida pointed at the bones on the ground and stared coldly at everyone, including Jin Yuxuan. It was as if the bones Grandpa Yang had stepped on were his ancestors. In fact, it was indeed so. The dozens of bones on the ground were all Wu Lida's ancestors. In other words, they were Zhan Wu's former subordinate. And one of them was definitely Wu Lili, whom Qin Hao had taught. Grandpa Yang had crushed Wu Lida's ancestor. How could he not be angry? Aren't you too arrogant? President Jin, shouldn't you give our High Clan an explanation? The other three High Clan elders glared at Jin Yuxuan with righteous indignation. They couldn't let Grandpa Yang be humiliated for no reason. Cough cough. Everyone, don't be impulsive. Commander Wu Lida must think that the bones here are seniors, so we should respect them. Also, slap. Before Jin Yuxuan could finish his words, another heavy slap sounded. This time, it was 10 times louder than the previous one. But this time, it wasn't Wu Lida who slapped others. It was him who was slapped. The one who slapped him was Qin Hao. Wu Lida gritted his teeth. The muscles on his face tightened as he glared at Qin Hao with murderous eyes. What about me? I can slap a mad dog like you whenever I want to. If President Jin is too lazy to discipline me, I, Qin Hao, am willing to serve you, Qin Hao said coldly with his hands behind his back. Brat, you must be tired of living. The hot-tempered Wu Lilong wanted to fight back against Qin Hao when he saw his elder brother being slapped. Commander Alang, please calm down. We're all in the same group. It's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. It's a blessing for us to meet by chance. We must unite and work together for a great cause. Jin Yuxuan hurriedly stopped him. It wasn't because he was kind, but because he had just come in. If he rashly killed someone, old fourth brother Hai who stayed above would definitely not let it go. What if he blocked the way out? If you want to kill someone, you can do it later. When you go back, you can say that Qin Hao had an accident in the cave and unfortunately passed away. Humph! Wu Lida snorted coldly. Under the instruction of his elder brother, Wu Lida, he temporarily let go of this grudge. Indeed, now was not the time to make a big fuss. Otherwise, it would be bad if Yi Longyuan was attracted. By the way, these weapons don't look like they're used by ordinary people. They look like military weapons. At this time, an idiot in Jin Yuxuan's team said. He bent down and picked up a long sword with sawteeth from the ground. He waved it in front of him a few times, making whooshing sounds. Then he nodded with satisfaction, feeling that it was very easy to use. He meant that he would accept this sword. Yes, although it's not a modern military style, it's indeed a military weapon from a long time ago. Commander Wu Lida, this is different from what you said. Jin Yuxuan watched as his subordinate stuffed the long sawtooth sword into his belt. He didn't stop him, but looked at Wu Lida in confusion. Before he came, Wu Lida told him that the treasure found by Hai Feizi was a fortune that could buy the Luoshui Empire. Jin Yuxuan thought it was money, but it turned out to be a pile of weapons to kill people. He didn't want weapons, he only wanted money. Damn it, selling military weapons in the Luoshui Empire was illegal. He would be sent to the military prison. President Jin, don't worry. The military weapons in front of us are just the tip of the iceberg. If we continue to explore, we'll definitely find more. Wu Lida didn't want to complicate matters and chose to continue to confuse the other party. Unfortunately, before he could finish speaking, an extremely horrifying scream came from the scene. Everyone looked in the direction of the scream. They found that it was the idiot youth who had stuffed the long sawtooth sword into his belt. He was thrown into the air by an inexplicable force. Then, a thick shadow flashed before everyone's eyes. It was shaped like a black python and rushed toward the idiot youth in the air. Then, a dark green liquid was sprayed by the black python monster. The idiot youth melted under everyone's eyes. Boom! Crack! It was as if the sky had flashed by and exploded on the head. Everyone was stunned. That idiot youth was a mortal saint. Yet, he was melted into nothing by a mouthful of liquid. How terrifying was that? Alert, alert! Protect President Jin! Everyone back to back. What exactly was that thick thing just now? More than 30 people instantly panicked and huddled together. The one squeezed in the middle was Jin Yuxuan, who was so scared that he almost peed his pants. Fortunately, he wasn't the one who had been swept away by the monster. It's too dangerous. Commander Wu Lida, quickly kill the monster. I don't want to become its food and then turn into feces. Jin Yuxuan wailed like a ghost. He didn't forget to take a puff of his cigarette to calm himself down. Big brother, did you see what it was just now? Wu Lida looked around and was on high alert. As a Yuan king, he wasn't afraid. However, it was very uncomfortable to be targeted by an unknown creature in the dark cave. It was too sudden. I didn't see it clearly. Wu Lida, who was the strongest, shook his head. It's a tentacle dragon. Qin Hao's voice sounded. Moreover, it's a tentacle dragon whose cultivation is comparable to a heavenly saint elite. Everyone be careful. As he spoke, Qin Hao secretly used the indestructible samsara technique to protect Senior Yang and the others. The tentacle dragon earlier was comparable to a level 8 heavenly saint. Everyone knew that beasts were slightly stronger than humans at the same level. Furthermore, the tentacle dragon was familiar with the dark environment and was good at drilling. Other than Qin Hao and Wu Lida, no one else present was its match. A tentacle dragon comparable to a level 8 heavenly saint? How is that possible? Senior Yang said with a bitter face. The tentacle dragon was a type of medicinal herb. Ordinary people were used to calling it an earthworm. Chapter 674. Even my big brother couldn't see it clearly. Are you sure it's an earthworm? Wu Lilong asked in a mocking tone. Qin Hao didn't answer. He used his actions to prove his judgment. The next moment, he waved his hand and a surge of essence energy swept out, throwing Senior Yang and the others into the air. Qin Hao rose up from the ground at the same time. Boom! A loud sound suddenly exploded from under everyone's feet. Instantly, a pile of people was blown up and shot out in all directions. As the ground cracked open, a huge black creature as thick as a vat drilled out from the ground. It was the tentacle dragon that had just killed the stupid young man. It let out a strange roar and its agile body flashed, directly attacking Jin Yuxuan, who was in the middle of the pile of people. Ah, I'm finished. My Lord Jin is going to play chess with the King of Hell. Jin Yuxuan flew up involuntarily. Seeing the huge earthworm landing in front of him and the other party's dark and terrifying appearance, he was so scared that his voice was unrecognizable. He had no doubt that if he was hit, he would definitely die. In the midst of the crisis, Qin Hao reacted quickly and used his water wind steps to kick Jin Yuxuan's butt at the critical moment. Instantly, Jin Yuxuan's fat body bounced into the distance like a rubber ball and hit the ground several times before stopping. Fortunately, Qin Hao's kick saved his life. Impudent beast! This time, Wu Lida also saw clearly that it was an earthworm. He also attacked very quickly. The Tianju divine spear condensed in his palm and stabbed at the other party's position. Blazing golden flames erupted from the tip of the spear. However, this earthworm was very agile. Its body fell quickly and sank into the ground again, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Wu Lida's attack missed and penetrated a long distance before crashing into the stone wall, creating a hole in the stone slab. However, that earthworm was completely unharmed. This was very awkward. A mere earthworm attacked Jin Yuxuan in front of a 7-star Yuan monarch and was able to escape unscathed. However, Wu Lida couldn't do anything about it. It was simply mocking the other party's incompetence. Thank you. Jin Yuxuan fell until his nose was bruised and his face was swollen. He crashed into the pile of weapons in the catacombs. In the end, a long sword stabbed into his thigh. Fresh blood flowed out. However, he didn't seem to feel any pain. Instead, he lay on the ground leisurely, took 2 puffs of his cigarette, and thanked Qin Hao. However, his trembling hands betrayed him. He was pretending to be calm. Perhaps he was glad that he had not been taken away by the King of Hell. What a powerful impact! I feel like I was sent flying by a giant tree. Its speed is too fast. It's very familiar with the terrain and is also very adaptable. It disappeared in the blink of an eye. We can only passively let it attack us. Even Great Commander Wu Li can't do anything about the battle in its territory. Lord Jin, let's come back another day to collect this treasure. Why don't we retreat first? Everyone was frightened and surrounded Jin Yuxuan to persuade him. Great Commander Wu Li, I didn't hire you to do acrobatics. Jin Yuxuan also had the intention to withdraw, but he was actually still a little unwilling. He could only exert pressure on Wu Lida. "Don't worry. If that beast appears again, I'll definitely be able to kill it." Wu Lida spoke with great confidence. He looked around vigilantly, as if looking for the earthworm's movements. Unfortunately, even with Wu Lida's ability, he could not sense it at all when he spread his consciousness. The humidity in the catacombs was very high. The soil was also extraordinary and had the effect of shielding life. Unless one's mentality grade was high enough, otherwise, it was impossible to predict where the earthworm would emerge from next. This thing was extremely dangerous. However, Qin Hao could. In fact, Qin Hao was looking at Jin Yuxuan with a faint smile. To be more precise, he was looking at Jin Yuxuan's buttocks because a spectacular scene was about to erupt there. "Speaking of which, Qin Hao, boy, although you saved my life, I'll remember this kindness. However, you can't look at me with such thirsty eyes, right?" "Sorry, I'm not interested in men," Jin Yuxuan said smugly. After that, he continued to smoke. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, a shocking explosion came from under Jin Yuxuan's buttocks, directly lifting him into the sky. Immediately, the earthworm appeared again and rolled towards Jin Yuxuan. "Damn it, why am I always the one getting hurt? I'm wasting my time with Lord Jin." Jin Yuxuan wailed in midair. Once again, he was faced with an awkward situation where he could not control himself. He immediately looked at Qin Hao for help. In response, Qin Hao looked into the distance as if admiring the beautiful scenery. He praised, "Lord Jin, the Saint-grade poison prevention pill you ate is not bad. You've also been burned with incense, right? I have to say, your status in the business alliance is extraordinary. You live in luxury and you're so white and fat. You even need incense to eat a pill. Who else will the earthworm look for if not you?" These words also revealed the reason for Jin Yuxuan's attack. However, Jin Yuxuan did not have the time to admire Qin Hao's gaze. Instead, he shouted anxiously, "Commander Wu Lida, save me quickly! Evil creature, don't be presumptuous." In fact, Wu Lida had already made his move. He stabbed with his spear and his target was the earthworm's head. However, with his speed, it was impossible for him to kill the earthworm before saving Jin Yuxuan. Only when the earthworm killed Jin Yuxuan would Wu Lida be able to kill this troublesome tentacle dragon. This was clearly using Jin Yuxuan as bait. However, the earthworm would not meet force with force. It decisively chose to give up on its prey. It twisted its body and scuttled to the ground, disappearing without a trace in an instant. On the other hand, Wu Lida's spear almost brushed past Jin Yuxuan's face, leaving behind a trail of blood. Just a little bit more and Jin Yuxuan's head would have been separated from his body. Wu Lida! Jin Yuxuan escaped from death once again. He smashed a big hole in the ground and roared angrily at Wu Lida. He felt as if he had bought a money-losing product and hired the other party as a bodyguard, but it did not have the desired effect. "I'm sorry, President Jin. I also had no choice. Only by using you as bait can I kill this thing. However, you don't have to be afraid because my two brothers also made a move just now." At this time, Wu Lida explained with a dark face and pointed behind Jin Yuxuan. Behind him stood Wu Lilong and Wu Lihu. Just now, the three of them had the ability to protect Jin Yuxuan's safety. Humph! Jin Yuxuan snorted coldly, feeling very uncomfortable in his heart. At this moment, he clearly despised Wu Lida and the other two. "Young Master Qin Hao, do you have a way to kill this thing? If you kill it and cut it into 8 pieces, I will make some concessions in the division of the treasure." Jin Yuxuan walked in front of Qin Hao and spoke very sincerely. There was even a hint of obscure pleading in his tone. As one of the 12 great counselors of the Merchant Alliance, he was actually being molested by an earthworm. If word got out, wouldn't people laugh their heads off? He had to cut the earthworm into 10,000 pieces. For this, he did not hesitate to give up a portion of the treasure. Of course, at this moment, Jin Yuxuan was not looking for Wu Lida but Qin Hao. This was enough to show that Qin Hao was more useful than Wu Lida. In fact, Jin Yuxuan could faintly see it. About this? Since you once helped Dafu, I'll reluctantly help you solve it. Qin Hao nodded. To him, killing a tentacle dragon was just a matter of casually swinging his sword. Haha, with just you? You dare to boast about killing an earthworm? Wu Lilong pointed at Qin Hao. Even his own big brother could not do anything. What was Qin Hao? Chapter 675. Heatwave spread out, forcing Wu Lilong to take a few steps back. Haha, alright, I'll wait and see. Wu Lilong refused to admit defeat. He didn't believe in Qin Hao's ability. Then open your eyes wide and watch carefully. As the red lotus soul fire rose, Qin Hao strode toward Jin Yuxuan and rudely pushed him away with his shoulder. Jin Yuxuan didn't even know what was going on before he rolled out again. Bang! The ground he was standing on crumbled. Amidst the smoke and dust, a thick and dark body reappeared. Qin Hao had already calculated the timing, so he raised the red lotus soul fire in advance. He opened his right hand and took out the dragon-slaying sword from his spatial ring. When the tentacle dragon drilled out of the ground, he waved the sword in his hand and accurately wrapped it around the tentacle dragon. Come out! Qin Hao roared. He waved the dragon-slaying sword with both hands and released a 10-meter-long sword chi. The sword chi condensed into flames and was extremely hot. He wrapped the earthworm around the sword and pulled it out of the ground. Qin Hao raised his primordial chi and quickly rose into the air. The giant earthworm's body was also revealed in front of everyone. After it was completely pulled out, it was about 100 meters long and extremely thick. It was extremely terrifying. The scene in front of them was absolutely shocking. Qin Hao seemed to be fighting a black dragon. The earthworm was wrapped around the sword. The red lotus soul fire had a strong stickiness. Under the burning flames, it let out a strange cry and couldn't break free no matter how hard it tried. Explode! Qin Hao swung the earthworm with his sword and waved it a few times, creating a strong wind. He then slashed the ground with his sword. Boom! The underground cave was about to collapse. When the sword slashed down, the 100-meter-long earthworm was cut into several pieces. As the flames burned everywhere, it had no chance to escape and gradually turned into ashes. He killed the tentacle dragon, which is comparable to an 8th-level heavenly saint, with one slash. Isn't that too terrifying? Moreover, the angle and timing of his attack are extremely precise. The burly men from the Jin Clan Chamber of Commerce were dumbfounded. This time, they had no choice but to admit defeat. After all, Qin Hao had killed the tentacle dragon so easily even though it was in a favorable terrain. Even the 7-star Yuan monarch, Wu Lida, could not do so. In fact, Wu Lida's face was already red. Humph, you merely calculated that the earthworm would attack President Jin. What's so great about that? If I had been standing in front of President Jin, I could have done the same, Wu Linglong said in a sour tone. However, he seemed to have forgotten that he was actually standing in front of Jin Yuxuan just now. However, when the tentacle dragon attacked, he was completely caught off guard. No matter what, this troublesome beast is finally dead. You dare to attack me, Lord Jin, repeatedly. You despicable thing, I'll let you attack, I'll let you attack. Jin Yuxuan looked at the broken pieces of earthworms on the ground and was instantly overjoyed. With an incomparably carefree mood, he lifted his fleshy leg and kicked at a lump of black flesh. This huge lump of black meat was very special because it hadn't been completely burned yet. But suddenly, the piece of black meat on the ground flew up. With a strange cry, it flew towards Jin Yuxuan again and crashed into his chest, sending him flying. Heavens, he's still alive. That piece of meat seems to be the head of an earthworm. The burly men of the Jin Chamber of Commerce were shocked and anxiously ran towards the place where Jin Yuxuan was sent flying. Speaking of which, President Jin was really unlucky. Before the earthworm died, it still hit him again. It could be seen how much it liked Jin Yuxuan. Boom! Along with the sound of heavy landing and the sound of bones being crushed, the crowd rushed to Jin Yuxuan. Jin Yuxuan was sent flying for a long distance. His back hit the rock wall. After landing, he held the earthworm's head in his arms. His triangular eyes rolled back and a large amount of white foam flowed out of his mouth. There were even traces of blood in the white foam. Judging from the extent of the crack in the rock wall, it was obvious that this hit was not light. After all, even the rock wall had a hole in it. Fortunately, this earthworm was seriously injured. In fact, it had already died under Qin Hao's Red Lotus sword chi. The attack just now was its remaining strength before it died. Otherwise, Jin Yuxuan would have died long ago. At this time, Qin Hao noticed the hole in the rock wall. Behind the hole, there seemed to be another space. Could it be that they were now on the first floor of the treasure trove? Hey, big brother, look, there's a hole here. Wu Lida pointed at the hole in the rock wall for Wu Lida to see. Shut up. Wu Lida had already seen it. The hole was so big, and there was a trace of cold wind blowing out from it, making people shudder. President Jin, wake up. Congratulations on finding the entrance to the second floor of the treasure trove. Qin Hao bent down and pinched Jin Yuxuan's philtrum acupuncture point. Oh, the second floor? Jin Yuxuan instantly became lively. When he heard about the treasure trove, he threw away the earthworm's head in his arms. He patted his butt and got up. Then, he carefully looked at the hole he had made. Standing in front of the hole, he could feel the extremely cold wind blowing. It was as if he was facing an ice cellar. Jin Yuxuan couldn't help but shiver. Hey kid, take your men in and take a look. Wu Lida poked Qin Hao's chest with his finger as if he was giving an order. In fact, the longer they stayed in the catacombs, the worse his attitude became. Qin Hao also noticed this. Wu Lida and the other two's killing intent was getting stronger. It was not just directed at him, but at everyone. If he were in their shoes, they would not let Qin Hao and Jin Yuxuan walk out alive. The hundreds of thousands of weapons on the first floor alone were the military secrets of East Continent's Qin. Only the dead would not leak this secret. Take your dog hands off, Qin Hao said coldly. Our young master took the lead to enter the first floor. President Jin, it's your turn to enter the second floor first. Elder Yang said in a timely manner. An earthworm had caused everyone to panic. Who knew if there were other monsters on the second floor? Or perhaps it was a monster even more powerful than an earthworm. I told you to enter, so you King enter. What's with the nonsense? Wu Lida became more aggressive and poked Qin Hao's chest again. This reminded Qin Hao of a dog slave called Song Zhong. But now was not the time to fall out with him. He smiled coldly and said, Fine, I'll go first. You guys follow closely. After saying that, he smashed the rock wall with a punch. Qin Hao lowered his head and bent his waist, entering the entrance to the second floor. Young master! Elder Yang was anxious and quickly followed with his men. Go in quickly! Jin Yuxuan called out to his men. He was afraid that Qin Hao would steal the treasures after entering first, so he hurried to follow. A bunch of reckless fools. Wu Lida was not anxious at all. He even stood at the entrance for a few seconds. He was not sure if the person who brought Qin's weapons here was still alive. There was no aura of that person on the first floor. Maybe he was on the second floor. If they were still alive, then Qin Hao's group of people would definitely be wiped out in a single blow, leaving not even dregs behind. Even if they were not dead, then it was time for the three brothers to bury Qin Hao and Jin Yuxuan's men here. Later, act according to my signal. Wu Lida exchanged glances with his two brothers. The three nodded and chose to enter the second floor. Chapter 676. Qin Hao went deeper and deeper into the passageway of the second level, his mind full of doubts. The weapons buried on the first level were undoubtedly from the East Continent's Qin. Looking at the shape of the weapons, it was obvious that they had been refined. Although they didn't belong to this era, they were much more advanced than the current Luoshui Empire's weapons. Their lethality was far greater than modern weapons. Qin Hao vaguely felt that the modification was made according to his own intentions. But Qin Hao couldn't remember. This was most likely because he had lost part of his memory. After all, if he died under the Nine Heavens God's punishment array, it would be good enough to keep his soul. But who was it that brought them here? To be able to take away Qin Hao's belongings under the nose of Zhan Wu and Han Lingxian, and to break through the encirclement of tens of thousands of Qin masters and tens of millions of soldiers. This person's ability was definitely one of the best in the continent. Was it Imperial Wind, Qingqing, Xinyue, or Zhan Lang? Qin Hao thought as he walked, his mood gradually becoming more and more excited. Other than the 4 Emperor-level powerhouses he had trained, he couldn't think of anyone else who had such abilities. If it was one or both of them who brought the weapons here. From the corpses of the pursuers on the first level, it was very likely that Zhan Lang and the others were still alive. After all, from the traces of battle, Qin Hao could see that the pursuers were killed by an overwhelming force. In fact, this was also the reason why he couldn't wait to come to the second level. It wasn't because he was afraid of Wu Lilong, but because he had to find Zhan Lang before he did. Qin Hao guessed that even if Zhan Lang and the others didn't die, they might be severely injured, or even fatally injured. This was also the reason why Qin Hao wasn't afraid to go to the second level. Zhan Lang and the others definitely wouldn't attack Qin Hao. They would definitely recognize the kingly aura on Qin Hao. Thinking of this, he quickened his pace. The people in the depths of the catacombs were Qin Hao's family. After walking for some time, there was a faint halo in front of him. Although it was very weak, it was very special. There was light in the dark catacombs? Moreover, the closer he got, the more surging the spirit chi became. It even gave him a feeling of vastness. This caused everyone in the group to become excited. Everyone present was a martial artist, so their perception of spirit chi was exceptionally sharp. The treasures on the second floor are definitely much more valuable than those on the first floor. The spiritual chi is too abundant. I wonder what kind of treasure it is. No matter what kind of treasure it is, just cultivating in the second level will be much faster than cultivating in the outside world. Who knows, we might even be able to break through our cultivation. Excited voices came from the group. Everyone's footsteps subconsciously quickened. I smelled gold from afar. Jin Yuxuan licked his lips. His eyes were filled with greed as he moved his short legs. As an ordinary person, his speed was not any slower than a warrior's. Gradually, everyone arrived at the location where the second layer was glowing. He looked up and found that he was surrounded by mysterious crystals. No, it should be said that they were all earth crystals. They were almost integrated with the catacombs. Some were like icicles, embedded at the top of the catacombs. Some were like clusters of flowers, embedded on the stone walls. They were densely packed and spread all over the place, varying in size. The spirit chi contained in them was dozens of times more than ordinary mysterious crystals. The spirit chi was very pure. Even the earth crystals sold in the market could not be compared to them. The quality was too high. According to this number, there were no less than a few 100 million of them. The amount was simply too shocking. If a person were to absorb all of the crystals here, they would be able to raise an ordinary mortal saint to the Emperor realm. If one looked at the big picture, they could easily support the soldiers of 2 legions. This was indeed a shocking amount of wealth. In particular, there was a pyramid-like crystal mountain at the very center of the mountain. Its color was much brighter than those on the top of the catacombs and the stone walls. The light it emitted was platinum. There was no doubt that the entire crystal mountain was made of celestial crystals. At the top of the crystal mountain, there seemed to be an unknown object. It was too far away for everyone to see clearly. Judging by its shape, it seemed to be a large coffin. However, they did not have the time to admire the coffin. They only cared about the sparkling crystals in front of them. Jin Yuxuan drooled. The burly men of the Jin family Chamber of Commerce were so excited that they could not help but tremble. Even Elder Yang, who had always been calm, was excited. "We're rich. We're rich. Ha ha ha, such a large amount of crystals can double the strength of the Jin family Chamber of Commerce, no, 5 times. From now on, the Jin family Chamber of Commerce will become the most powerful Chamber of Commerce in the Western Liang Chamber of Commerce. President Jin can compete for the next chairman with his huge financial resources." The members of the Jin family Chamber of Commerce were ecstatic. Some people began to flatter Jin Yuxuan. After all, whoever flattered him would get more crystals later. "Haha, you flatter me. How can I, Jin Yuxuan, have the ability to be the chairman?" Jin Yuxuan said modestly on the surface, but the smile on his face told everyone that from this moment on, Jin Yuxuan's position in Western Liang would rise again. In the future, even the chairman would have to be courteous to him. "Lord Jin, don't forget about the High Chamber of Commerce. According to the agreement you signed with our Lord High, you can only get 10% of the treasures on the second floor. The other 90% belongs to the High Chamber of Commerce." Elder Yang and another person said with a straight face. 10%? Sorry, I don't remember. Maybe we should divide it again. I'll take 10%. And your High Chamber of Commerce can take away the scraps on the first floor. What do you think, young Master Qin? Jin Yuxuan turned hostile and his smile disappeared. He looked at Qin Hao insidiously as if he was threatening him. At this moment, more than 30 saint-level martial artists of the Jin family Chamber of Commerce surrounded Qin Hao and the other 4 people with tacit understanding. The scene was clearly forcing Qin Hao to sign a new agreement. With Qin Hao's status in the High Chamber of Commerce, he had enough authority. Moreover, the agreement signed by Qin Hao could not be changed even by Haidafu. Therefore, Jin Yuxuan seized the opportunity. "For the sake of saving my life, if you obediently sign the agreement, I will spare your life. Moreover, I will allow you to take away all the weapons on the first floor. Otherwise, don't blame my Golden Jade Pavilion for being merciless. You have to understand that I'm just a businessman. I don't want to kill people. But if anyone dares to block my path to wealth, I'll send him to his death." Jin Yuxuan spoke again. His tone was very dignified. The last sentence was completely shouted. "Lord Jin, don't go too far. It's illegal to sell military weapons in Luoshui. You know this very well. Giving us all the treasures on the first floor is actually useless. Moreover, you're deliberately tricking our young Master Qin." Elder Yang was afraid that Qin Hao did not know the seriousness of the matter, so he responded loudly. So what? In short, I want all the crystal stones here. If you dare to disobey, I'll kill you." Jin Yuxuan smiled coldly. Chapter 677. Jin Yuxuan was stunned. He looked at Wu Lilong in disbelief. "Commander Alang, what do you mean? Why are you suddenly so unfriendly?" Wu Lilong looked at Jin Yuxuan as if he was looking at an idiot. He laughed and said, "I said it very clearly. Kill everyone here, not only Qin Hao but also you, Chairman Jin." Jin Yuxuan's heart skipped a beat. "Why do you want to kill me? I'm paying you, so you should protect me." "Save it, little Jin, don't you understand? Actually, this is their trap. The treasure is the key thing they've been looking for. Because of Luoshui's influence in Western Liang, it's not convenient for them to excavate it. They can only borrow your hand to sneak into the treasure hunting team and kill everyone here. Then someone will take away the weapons and crystals here. Like this, they can cross the sea and safely return to East Qin. Even Qin Hao was worried about Jin Yuxuan's intelligence. In the end, he looked at Wu Lilong and said, "Am I right, people of East Qin?" Pa, pa, pa. There was a steady applause. Wu Lida praised, "Kid, you're really not ordinary. At such a young age, Representative High of the Western Liang Chamber of Commerce calls you young master. You're really smart. East Qin is really lucky to have a military advisor like you. It's a pity that you have to die today. What makes me curious is that, how did you know we were East Qin martial artists?" "Oh, so you've been deceiving me?" Jin Yuxuan finally understood. He pointed at Wu Lilong with an indignant expression. Everyone present was infuriated. They had thought that they had obtained the treasure, but in the end, they had been deceived by outsiders. Moreover, no one would be able to leave alive today. Wu Lilong and the others only sneered at this. "It doesn't matter how I saw it. What's important is that I'm afraid you won't be able to take away these crystals as you wish." Qin Hao looked fearless. He condensed a wisp of energy and flicked it at a cluster of crystals on the stone wall. After the energy made contact with the crystals, there was a loud bang. A hole appeared in the stone wall and black smoke billowed out. That cluster of earth crystals instantly turned into black dregs, becoming a useless waste. And at this moment it seemed to have caused a chain reaction. All the crystals on the second floor flickered restlessly, as if they would explode in the next second. Array formation? Wu Lida was very shocked. That's right. Someone set up a confinement formation here in advance. If any external force forcibly moves the earth crystal, it will explode. Not only would the explosion destroy the earth crystal stones, but it would also kill people. Even a 7th level Yuan monarch wouldn't be able to escape. If you don't believe me, you can touch the sky crystal mountain in the center. Give it a try. Qin Hao pointed at the enormous sky crystal mountain in the center. This caused Wu Lida's expression to become bitter. Even if they killed everyone present, they would not be able to take away a single item. They would not be able to complete the mission that the battle arch had given them. Whether it was the weapons on the first floor or the crystal stones in front of him, they were all East Qin's treasures. The battle arch had told him that he had to take everything away at all costs. Not a single item was to be left behind. Because these things seemed to be related to Dendi, who had died 600 years ago. Wu Lida and the others did not know what the specific relationship was. Wu Lida guessed that the battle arch was reminiscing about Dendi, who had died. After all, 600 years had passed. The battle arch had reached the level of a demigod. There was no one in the world who could match him. Heroes were lonely. Big brother, this chain array formation is a bit like our family's sensory sealing divine array. Moreover, it's an extremely powerful sensory sealing divine array. If we forcibly move the crystals again, it will cause the entire underground cavern to be destroyed. It's not even a problem to destroy the capital of Luoshui. Wu Lida's voice trembled as he spoke. His eyes were filled with fear as he looked at the surrounding earth crystal stones. The entire capital of Luoshui would be blown up. It was impossible for them to escape from such a monstrous power. This was going to be difficult. The most advanced sensory sealing divine array? That's a method that only our ancestors know. With our attainments, it's impossible to break it. Wu Lida clenched his fist. Their family's array formation had already reached the essence. They did not know the secrets of the most advanced array formation. Ha ha ha, are you here to be funny? You can't break your family's array formation and still want to take away the treasure. I've seen stupid people, but I've never seen someone as stupid as a pig. Jin Yuxuan said with his hands behind his back. He was already dead anyway. He was no longer afraid of these three heartless and unscrupulous people who had deceived Sir System's pure heart. Moreover, if he was going to die, Jin Yuxuan would just crash his head into the sky crystal stone mountain and let everyone be destroyed. Even if he died, he would be buried with them. Therefore, he was fearless at this moment. Similarly, this was the same view that everyone present shared. Therefore, at this moment, there was no distinction between high and low. Presidents, elders, all of them were worthless lives. I can break this array formation. Just as everyone was thinking that they had nothing to lose, Qin Hao's voice rang out. It was like the sound of nature's voice that saved all living beings. What did you say? You can break it? Everyone first looked at each other, then collectively looked at Qin Hao. They were full of disbelief. Kid, are you telling the truth? If you dare to lie to me. Wu Lida condensed a ball of red vitality in his right hand. He meant that if Qin Hao dared to lie to him, he would be the first to send Qin Hao to hell. Seeing this, Elder Yang and the other three immediately stood side by side in front of Qin Hao. So what if I lie to you? Try it if you dare. However, I'm 90% sure that I can break this array formation, Qin Hao said. In reality, this was not the highest level of sensing sealing array. The array formation in front of them was a set of gadgets that Qin Hao taught to Wu Lida's ancestor, Wu Lili 600 years ago. This place was like a 9-palace jigsaw puzzle. As long as the eye of the array was pulled out, the entire array would collapse and completely lose its effect. Moreover, Qin Hao also guessed that the person who set up the array was Wu Lili. Could it be that Wu Lili was not dead? Qin Hao couldn't help but feel a little apprehensive. Wu Lili was already a low-level primitive emperor back then. With his 600 years, even if the other party was a stupid pig, if he did not die, his cultivation would at least reach the high-level primitive emperor level. In the whole of Western Liang, the strongest person, Yilong Yuan, was only an 8-star primitive emperor. If Wu Lili was not dead, he could turn Western Liang upside down and do whatever he wanted. As he spoke, Qin Hao subconsciously looked at Sky Crystal Mountain in the center. At the top of Sky Crystal Mountain, there was a black coffin. Who was in the coffin? Could it be Zhan Lang? Or Wu Lili? Qin Hao could not tell, so he was very nervous at this moment. If he guessed wrong, he would be doomed eternally. Kid, go and open that coffin. Wu Lida seemed to have realized that the key to the array was the coffin. Thus, he pointed to the top of Sky Crystal Mountain, forcing Qin Hao to open it. Young master, you must not. Elder Yang immediately opened his arms to stop him. If Qin Hao helped him break the array and Wu Lida did not admit it, he would definitely kill him again. By then, no one in the underground cavern would be able to escape. Who do you think you are? Get lost. Chapter 678. Finally, Wu Lida took a deep breath and pretended to be sincere. Boy, if you break this formation for me, I will give you a generous reward. Actually, there is no enmity between us, right? Personally, I admire you very much. After you break this array for me, if you want to become the overlord of Western Liang, my East Qin will fully support you and let you have the strength to match Luo Shui. Or if you don't like Western Liang, you can follow me back to East Qin. At that time, I will put in a good word for you in front of Empress Ling Xian and the Battle Emperor. I will give you an incomparably high East Qin noble title and let you be a person above others. It will be 1,000 times better than following that dog shit Haidafu. Wu Lida continued to entice him. He believed that no one would refuse his conditions and Qin Hao was not an exception. Becoming a noble of the East Continent's Daqin was an unattainable dream for the millions of ants in Western Liang. The East Continent was much richer than Western Liang. Right now, as long as Qin Hao nodded, he could realize his life's dream and see the wider world. Young master, you can't agree to him. Old Yang was lying on the ground as he anxiously spoke. In his eyes, Wu Lida's group of East Qin people were not trustworthy. Will you keep your word? Qin Hao ignored Old Yang and asked Wu Lida. I, the East Qin martial artist, as well as the Battle Emperor's dignity, promise you that if I go back on my word, I will be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. Wu Lida raised his hand above his head as he solemnly swore. All right, I'll open the coffin. I hope Commander Wu Lida will not forget his promise. Qin Hao revealed an excited appearance as he turned around and climbed up the heavenly crystal mountain. When he turned around, Wu Lida's lips curled into a cold smile. Promise? There was no promise to a dead person. Of course, for the sake of the Battle Emperor's reputation, he could give Qin Hao an East Qin noble title after killing him. But what was the use of a dead person's title? AI. Old Yang shook his head and gave a long sigh. Looking at his young master's style, he did not seem like a brainless person. Why couldn't he resist the temptation? Young people were still too inexperienced. However, Qin Hao was not tempted by the other party to open the coffin of Sky Crystal Mountain. In fact, no matter who was in the coffin before Qin Hao, he had to open it. If he slashed the waves, he would be saved. If it was Wu Lili, he would have to kill him before he fully recovered his strength. Although this trip was dangerous, Qin Hao had no other choice. This was what he should do as Dendi, even if he knew that there was danger ahead. As for the so-called martial artist's personality that Wu Lili mentioned, it was no different from a fart. Qin Hao did not believe him. He climbed all the way to the top of Sky Crystal Mountain. He was extra careful with every step he took. If he moved the crystals even a little bit, it would be enough to cause the entire catacombs to explode. As he got closer and closer to the black coffin, Qin Hao's heart surged uncontrollably. Along the way, he tried to use his mind power to probe the inside of the coffin. Unfortunately, he couldn't sense anything inside. The coffin didn't seem to be an ordinary object. From the looks of it, he had to open it himself. At this moment, Qin Hao finally stood at the top of the mountain. Looking at the huge black coffin in front of him, he felt a sense of oppression. At the same time, the red lotus soul fire combined with the inextinguishable samsara technique quickly circulated around his body. His muscles tightened, and the dragon's soul power was pushed to the limit. If he opened the coffin and found Wu Lili lying inside, Qin Hao was confident that he could use the Great Void Divine Sword to injure or even kill him the moment he woke up. Nodding, Qin Hao took a deep breath and pressed his palms on the lid of the coffin. As long as he pushed it forward, the truth would come to light. It's about to open. Wu Liliang looked at this scene anxiously. He was on high alert. At the same time, the three of them were also very afraid. They were afraid that the person lying in the black coffin was the terrifying existence who brought the military weapon from the East Continent. Fortunately, they had Qin Hao as cannon fodder. Once they realized that something was wrong, the three brothers were confident that they could escape. As for Jin Yuxuan and the others, not a single one of them was left alive. Therefore, the secret of the treasure would not be leaked out in the end. When the time came, Wu Liliang and the others could ask for help from the East Continent and ask the War Emperor to send stronger helpers. Oh my God, my heart is beating so fast. My heart is also pounding. Will everyone die here? The burly men of the Jin family Chamber of Commerce stared at Qin Hao without blinking. They regretted coming here. They should not have been so greedy for the treasure. Based on the traces of the array and the chain reaction of the array, there is no doubt that the eye of the array is in the coffin. With a frown, Qin Hao clenched his teeth and pushed forward, releasing an unparalleled amount of power. Creak! It was accompanied by a hair-raising sound. The lid of the coffin was pushed open. Looking through the gradually opening gap, Qin Hao was stunned on the spot at first glance. He couldn't help but cry out involuntarily, "How is this possible?" Qin Hao's expression was extremely shocked. It was completely beyond his expectations. There was nothing in the coffin. No wonder he could not sense anything when he probed with his mind. "What did you see?" Wu Liliang asked nervously. Large amounts of sweat rolled down his face. "Did you find the eye of the array?" Jin Yuxuan also asked. There was a loud boom. As soon as they finished speaking, the entire underground cavern shook. Large pieces of soil and stone fell from the top. Smoke and dust filled the cavern in an instant, blocking everyone's vision. Everyone swayed. Their bodies seemed to be suspended in the air. They fell involuntarily. It felt like they were falling into an endless hell. Wails of ghosts and howls of wolves could be heard everywhere. The celestial crystal mountain that Qin Hao was standing on suddenly collapsed, and his entire body was buried inside. Furthermore, a strange power grew and enveloped Qin Hao, causing his consciousness to become blurry. His mind was blank, and he could only feel himself falling, but he could not do anything to resist. The falling time was not long. To everyone, it was just a matter of seconds. When Qin Hao regained consciousness and opened his eyes again, the dark underground cavern had disappeared. In front of him was a strange forest. The trees in the forest were twisted in shape. The branches were purple. Even the leaves were suffused with purple gas. There was a faint purple fog all around. Other than the trees, no animals could be found. It was like entering another world. In short, the world in front of him was extremely strange. Elder Yang? Elder Tian? Qin Hao patted his dizzy head. He pushed away the sky crystal on his body and climbed out of the pile of stones. He called out a few times and looked around. His mind also expanded in an instant. Unfortunately, he did not get any response from the High Family Chamber of Commerce. He did not feel the breath of any living person. The whole team seemed to have evaporated. What is this place? Qin Hao furrowed his brows and looked around. Everything he saw was purple. This was a strange space. However, he was sure that it was not a man-made illusion or dream. It was also not an alternate space. This world really existed on the mainland. It was just that for some reason it was sealed under the underground cavern. Because of the activation of the sealing formation, the entrance to this world was unintentionally opened. Everything in front of him was still in the state before it was sealed. Chapter 679. He bent down and grabbed a handful of purple soil from under his feet and crushed it in his palm. Judging from the age of the soil, it was undoubtedly an environment from 600 years ago. There seemed to be some special power here. This power could only allow plants to survive and not animals, so there were no animals here. Suddenly, the great void cauldron became restless, sending an important signal to Qin Hao. Qin Hao's mind flashed. He looked toward the southeast in surprise. Tranquil water. At this moment, the great void cauldron clearly sensed the aura of the tranquil water coming from the southeast. Without thinking, Qin Hao raised his essence chi and unfurled the essence wings on his back, flying over quickly. Entering the catacombs to help Hai Dafu collect the treasure was only one of his goals. The more important thing was to get back the tranquil water. The tranquil water had the ability to create heaven and earth. It was the key to resurrecting Qin Yun. Since he was fine, Wu Lida and the others must be alive too. He had to get it before the other party. He flew all the way. Qin Hao looked down from mid-air and found that this world was not small, but it was also quite desolate. The earth was covered with scars from the flames of war. Purple mountains were cut off or even destroyed by external forces. Judging from the extent of the destruction, there must have been an emperor-level powerhouse in the battle. Moreover, some of the sword marks left on the mountains were very familiar to Qin Hao, as if they were his old friends. But he did not have time to stop and study those sword marks. Getting back the tranquil water was the key. After flying for a while, Qin Hao found something very bad. There were corpses on the ground in front of him. They were not old bones, but people who had been alive just a moment ago. It was one of the 4 elders of the High Family Chamber of Commerce who had accompanied him into the catacombs. Elder Tian. Qin Hao immediately landed and squatted beside him. Elder Tian looked very miserable. He had been hit several times, his clothes were torn, and blood flowed from his body. His fatal wound was on his chest. His sternum was caved in, and his heart was shattered beyond saving. But Elder Tian still had a weak breath left. Young Master Qin, run, run! Elder Tian shouted at Qin Hao with all his strength. His neck tilted, and he died in front of Qin Hao with his eyes wide open. Creak! Qin Hao clenched his fists and looked around. Around Elder Tian, there were more than a dozen other corpses. They were Jin Yuxuan's men. Moreover, looking at the state of these people's deaths, they were also killed by a palm strike. The murderer's internal energy was so strong that he killed everyone in an unstoppable manner. However, there was a living person among the pile of corpses. Although he concealed it well, it did not escape Qin Hao's eyes. Get out here! Qin Hao's palm swept out, carrying the wrath of an emperor. He sent the pile of corpses flying, revealing a fat body lying on the ground. This guy who was as fat as a pig was 2F** King familiar. It was Jin Yuxuan, the president of the Jin University. Ah, don't kill me, don't kill me! Haidafu's men were not killed by my subordinates. Spare my worthless life, spare my worthless life. Jin Yuxuan couldn't pretend anymore. He knelt in front of Qin Hao in a panic. He raised his hands above his head and kept kowtowing. Looking at his frightened and aggrieved face, it was as if he was the victim. I know Elder Tian was not killed by your men. Tell me what happened, Qin Hao said coldly. From Elder Tian's injuries, it was enough to judge that the murderer was Wu Lilong. Qin Hao and Wu Lilong had exchanged a palm strike and understood each other's strength. Moreover, Elder Tian's chest still had the viscous vitality characteristic of Wu Lilong. Young Master Qin, let's escape. We still have a chance to escape while Wu Lianglang hasn't reacted yet. Then, we can ask for reinforcements from the Luo River. We must kill these 3 bastards and avenge my subordinate. Jin Yuxuan cried with snot running down his nose. It was 2F** King terrifying just now. All his saint-level guards were killed in one move. It was not easy to train these guards. Jin Yuxuan had spent a lot of money. At this moment, in addition to fear, he was more angry and hateful. The killers he hired were completely out of his control. I won't talk nonsense a second time, tell me the details. Qin Hao's eyes trembled. This Jin Yuxuan really had no backbone other than wanting to live. Speaking of which, as long as young Master Qin helps me escape, you will be Jin Yuxuan's great benefactor in the future. I will be filial to you like Haidafu. Jin Yuxuan continued to kowtow. He was very afraid that Qin Hao would leave him behind. With his ability, he could not escape from the catacombs, especially when he did not know whether the earthworms on the first level were dead or not. If another one fell in love with him, the consequences would be unimaginable. President Jin, my patience is limited. Tell me the main point. Qin Hao could not stand it anymore. He flicked the golden finger next to Jin Yuxuan, creating a big pit. The raging waves of earth turned Jin Yuxuan upside down. He was as funny as a tortoise. They went to get the treasure and vaguely went to the southeast. Yes, they did go to the southeast. Young Master Qin, don't abandon me, quickly take me away. Jin Yuxuan did not dare to hide anymore. He anxiously crawled over and grabbed Qin Hao's pants tightly. His eyes were filled with tears, begging like a mistress abandoned by her husband. Get out of my way. Qin Hao kicked him to the ground. He surged his vitality and chased toward the southeast. At this moment, his heart was burning with anxiety. According to Jin Yuxuan, Wu Lida and the other 2 were rushing toward the tranquil nether water. What was puzzling was, how did Zhan Wu's 3 subordinates sense the tranquil nether water? After all, without the guidance of the Great Void Cauldron, Qin Hao could not detect the specific location of the tranquil nether water. But Wu Lida and the other 2 could. At this moment there was no time to think too much. Qin Hao increased his speed to the extreme. With a long tail of light, he disappeared into the sky in the blink of an eye. "Don't abandon me, I'll give you money. I'll give you the entire Jin clan chamber of commerce." Jin Yuxuan let out a heart-wrenching roar at Qin Hao's afterimage. Unfortunately, he could not call Qin Hao back. So money is not omnipotent in this world. Jin Yuxuan looked at the corpses on the ground and let out a helpless, bitter laugh. Immediately, he looked down at his chest. He pulled open his clothes, revealing a bronze mirror stuck to his chest. The bronze mirror was covered in cobwebs and showed signs of breaking apart. It was this bronze mirror that blocked Wu Lilong's palm, so Jin Yuxuan was lucky enough to survive. At that time, after Wu Lilong sent Jin Yuxuan flying, he thought that he would die without a doubt, so he did not check and flew directly to the southeast. Thinking of the scene where he was almost killed, Jin Yuxuan could not help but tremble all over. But at this moment, he gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. He looked at the flying Qin Hao and took out a black pill from his pants. Stuffing the black pill into his mouth, Jin Yuxuan let out an unpleasant scream. Suddenly, a layer of smoke gushed out from the bottom of his feet. With a whoosh, he jumped out like a rabbit. His speed was so fast that even heavenly saints could not catch up. Those who did not know would even think that Jin Yuxuan was a king stage expert. And his target was also the southeast. He decided that he had to catch up to Qin Hao. Only Qin Hao could bring him safely out of this place and return to the lovely Luoshui Empire. Chapter 680. Qin Hao chased after the southeast direction. Along the way, he encountered more than 10 corpses. There were Jin Yuxuan's subordinates and people from the High Clan Chamber of Commerce, including Elder Tian. 3 of the 4 elders who accompanied Qin Hao into the crypt were dead. Without exception, they were all killed by the 3 brothers' palm technique. However, Elder Yang's body was nowhere to be seen. Qin Hao guessed that he was probably dead as well. After the collapse of the second layer of the crypt, everyone fell into different places. Because they were too scattered, they were unable to protect them in time. Although Qin Hao knew that it was not his fault, he still felt a little guilty. He was getting closer and closer to the location of the tranquil water. He did not even need the guidance of the great void cauldron. The vast power of the water made Qin Hao's heart palpitate. When he fell under the 9 heavens gods' punishment formation, the tranquil water was one of the elements that formed the formation. This feeling was exactly the same as when he collected the red lotus fire. In front of him was a mountain range. Some of the mountain peaks were cut off, while others were split into 2 from the middle. It was as if a ghost had forcefully torn it apart with a giant axe. Looks like this was the main battlefield back then. Retracting the origin wings on his back, Qin Hao slowly floated down and landed in the purple forest. He walked forward carefully, vigilantly watching every movement around him. According to Jin Yuxuan, after Wu Lilong and the rest killed everyone, they would most likely arrive here first. He had to defend himself against the enemy's sneak attack at all times. Gradually, Qin Hao walked to the place where the aura of the tranquil water was the strongest. Looking forward, the strange purple fog lingered between the equally strange purple trees. It was like a fairy but also like a fantasy. However, there was no lake in the surrounding environment. There was not even a drop of water. It was so quiet that it made one's hair stand on end. However, at a glance, Qin Hao fell into an unprecedented state of shock. His emotions exploded to the point where he lost control of his life. In front of him, there was a graceful figure floating 10 meters in the air. She was a woman. The woman was wearing a purple phoenix robe and a phoenix crown. Her temperament was otherworldly, and she did not look like a mortal. Her beautiful eyes were tightly shut, and her black hair reached her waist. Her hair swayed without wind, and there was a red cinnabar mark between her eyebrows. It made her look like a fairy from the 9 heavens, and she had shed the demeanor of a peerless empress. At this moment she looked like she was sleeping, quiet and sweet. Any man who saw her would not have the heart to ruin the atmosphere and disturb her rudely. However, a merciless arrow pierced through the woman's chest, destroying her beauty. In this world where no one cared about her, she exuded endless poignant beauty. Wei Wei, Qin Hao's eyes instantly became moist. When he read out the name, his throat was choked with sobs. The girl before him was one of the few good friends he had in his previous life. No matter what the situation was, she would always choose to watch from afar and silently support him. She was also Empress Ziwei, the one who would accompany Qin Hao when he was lonely and frustrated. The purple myrtle heavenly rainbow sword technique was created by Qin Hao and Empress Ziwei together. Her real name was Mu Yue. In the eyes of the world, she was the high and mighty Empress Ziwei. Others could only kneel and worship her. In Qin Hao's eyes, she was just a quiet and gentle girl. Only Qin Hao dared to call her Wei Wei. However, the arrow that pierced through Mu Yue's chest, the arrow that killed her, was Qin Hao's arrow. The sunset divine arrow. Creak. As hot tears rolled down his cheeks, Qin Hao lowered his head and clenched his fists. He remembered. He remembered at last. 600 years ago, Daqin's holy land, Sunset Peak. Qin Hao chewed on a piece of dried grass as he sat at the edge of a cliff. It was as if he were above the 9 heavens, looking down on the world. He looked at the rolling sea of clouds in front of him, and frowned in boredom. "Are you worried about the Dongi people again?" A sweet-sounding female voice sounded out. The spotless Mu Yue didn't mind that the stone was dirty in the slightest. She sat beside Qin Hao with a smile on her face. Her watery eyes seemed to be able to speak as she quietly and admiringly looked at Qin Hao's face. "Yes." Qin Hao spat out the dried grass in his mouth and stood up. He pointed at the sea of clouds in the sunset divine blade and swore, without caring about his identity as the emperor. "Those bastards don't dare to fight us head-on, but they keep sneakily attacking our coastal citizens. When the Daqin army chased after them, they ran away. Wu has also been harassed by them time and time again, and is badly battered." Mu Yue was amused by Qin Hao. She looked at the sea of clouds and said, "Who would have thought that the great Dendi who intimidates heroes would be a hooligan in private?" "Hooligan? Who has a hooligan from the Dongi people?" Thinking about the bad habits of the Dongi people, Qin Hao spat in disgust. He took a deep breath and said with determination, "I've decided. I'm going to God Burial Valley." God Burial Valley? Mu Yue was greatly shaken and stood up nervously. She knew that God Burial Valley was the continent's #1 forbidden ground. It was filled with danger and was incomparably dangerous. Many emperor-rank experts of the previous generations had never returned. It was also known as the Emperor's Grave. Hearing that Qin Hao was going to God Burial Valley, how could she not be shocked? "With my battle strength, I can easily defeat the Emperor of the Eastern Barbarian Sky, but I can't compare to him in naval battles. Even with my brother Zhan Wu's help, it is impossible to kill him. In order to prevent future troubles and return peace to the people of Daqin, I'm going to God Burial Valley to find an opportunity to break through to the god level. Then I'll wipe out the Dongi people." Qin Hao looked away from the sea of clouds and turned around to look at Mu Yue seriously. "You've really decided?" "I've decided." At this moment Mu Yue stopped talking. This was the first time she felt that Qin Hao was so serious and determined. "I'll go with you." Mu Yue gritted her teeth and said, "Ha ha ha, why are you afraid that I'll be in danger? Forget it, forget it. You're a girl, so don't go. My brother and Lingxian are there. Moreover, you're the only empress in the Ziwei Empire." Qin Hao smiled. His smile was filled with confidence, meaning that he would return safely. Mu Yue was silent. She gritted her teeth. She was thinking, why can Lingxian go with you, but I can't? At this moment she finally understood. They had been together for 100 years, but Qin Hao's heart had never been with her. Never mind, being able to become friends with him for eternity was better than meeting strangers on the road. Mu Yue raised her head and suppressed the sadness in her heart. She smiled stubbornly. I'll wait for you to return. When you return, I'll give you a surprise. Surprise? Qin Hao was stunned. Then, he realized, oh. Beacon Fire Mystical Stallion? The Beacon Fire Mystical Stallion he spoke of was a mineral unique to the Ziwei Empire. It was used to forge weapons that were extremely sharp. Its lethality far exceeded that of other empires. In fact, it was the foundation of the Ziwei Empire's foothold in the Divine Wilderness continent. Especially the Ziwei Empire's smithing techniques, which were the best in the continent. Qin Hao's smithing techniques were learned from Mu Yue's father. I should have remembered that the weapons on the first floor were specially made for me by you. But why? Why did you die here? Qin Hao recalled the past. At this moment, he did not dare to raise his head to look at the lifeless empress in front of him. Back then, he was only joking. He knew that it was impossible to ask for the Ziwei Empire's mystical stallion iron. After all, it was what the Ziwei Empire relied on to survive in the continent. However, Mu Yue fulfilled her promise. For this batch of mystical stallion iron, and for Qin Hao, she was shot in the chest by the sunset divine arrow. She left her home and died in western Liang. Chapter 681. He could imagine that not long after he entered the Valley of the Gods, Mu Yue ordered all the craftsmen in the country to complete the weapon. She even sent it to the Daqin Empire before Qin Hao returned. That was a pleasant surprise. Unfortunately, what Mu Yue waited for was not Qin Hao's safe return. Instead, it was the shocking news of Qin Hao's death. At that moment she was so sad and angry. She did not believe that Qin Hao was killed by Zhan Lang and the others. In her anger, she attacked Zhan Wu and Han Lingxian, vowing to avenge Qin Hao. However, 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. Zhan Wu also had Qin Hao's semi-god weapon, the Sunset Divine Bow that terrified the experts of the continent. After a long battle, she was unfortunately hit by an arrow. Even if she died, Mu Yue would not let the Xianku ironware fall into the hands of Zhan Wu and Han Lingxian. She risked serious injuries to break through the encirclement and bring the Xianku ironware of the Ziwei Empire here. The reason why Zhan Wu did not chase after her personally was probably because he and Han Lingxian were also injured in the battle with Mu Yue. Qin Hao was quite confident in Vivian's strength and swordsmanship. As for why she brought the Xianku ironware to Luoshui in western Liang? Moreover, the location of the burial was the same as where the nether tranquil water fell. It was not hard to guess that the nether tranquil water that the great void cauldron swallowed carried Qin Hao's aura. Mu Yue had chased after Qin Hao's remnant qi to this place. After killing all of Wu Lily's pursuers, she fell into a deep sleep here. That shocking battle caused the ground to collapse and the surrounding world to sink into the ground. I dragged you into this, it's me. After thinking it through, Qin Hao choked with sobs. He was still thinking about who had such a shocking ability. He also felt that the sword mark on the mountain was very familiar. It was not Zhan Lang, Qin Qing, or Xinhua or Imperial Wind. It was the woman who often accompanied him on the setting sun peak to watch the sea of clouds, the woman who had always been as quiet as water. Ahahaha! I knew you would chase after me. You're finally here. Suddenly, a gloomy voice sounded. Qin Hao raised his head and saw Wu Lilang's figure. Wu Lilong walked out from behind a big tree, carrying Elder Yang, who was on the verge of death and covered in blood. Behind Wu Lilong were his eldest brother, Wu Lida, and second brother, Wu Lihu. The 3 of them looked at Qin Hao with teasing smiles. But when they saw the tear stains on Qin Hao's face, they couldn't help but be startled. Young master, you shouldn't have come, you shouldn't have come. Senior Yang wept weakly in Wu Lilong's hands. I'll give you a chance to leave your corpses intact. Release Elder Yang, or, Qin Hao suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground. Bang! The earth trembled, and a wave of dust rose behind him. The broken mountain peaks in the distance swayed and collapsed one after another. No, leave your corpses intact. Qin Hao's eyes were red, and 2 balls of red lotus soul fire burned in his eyes. He looked like a demon king that was about to explode. Zhan Wu's men had to die in front of Vivian. Leaving their corpses intact was Qin Hao's bottom line, and also his last mercy. Ha ha ha! Wu Lilong seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. Kid, it's not about who has the loudest voice who is stronger. If you want to compete in ruthlessness and voice, I'm louder than you. Wu Lilong roared, and his king-level aura surged. His body was shrouded in raging flames, and his roar spread out like a sound wave. Boom! 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 The sound wave swept out, uprooting the surrounding purple trees and collapsing dozens of mountains in the distance. The sound wave was even more spectacular than Qin Hao's. Cut the crap. You're just a heaven sage ant. Although you're not an ordinary heaven sage, in front of us 3 brothers, you can only be obedient and be trampled on. Now go and pull out the arrow from that woman in the air. No. Wu Lida gave Wu Lilong a look. Wu Lilong sneered and tightened his grip on Elder Yang's hand. Creak. Elder Yang's neck was 3 times thinner, and there were signs of it being snapped. In fact, the Wooly brothers only had one goal in mind when they investigated the Mystic Pin ironware. The more important mission was to retrieve the arrow that Zhan Wu shot at Empress Ziwei. The arrow had been lost for 600 years, and it was too important to Zhan Wu. He had to retrieve it. The sunset bow without the arrow was like an eagle without its wings. How could it kill its prey? After all, there were only 2 sunset arrows in the world. As he spoke, Wu Lida glanced at Mu Yue in the air. Empress Ziwei was silent, and her eyes were closed as if she was asleep. However, Wu Lida's eyes were filled with intense fear. He even spoke with a sobbing tone. The woman in front of him was the one who had severely injured the sunset battle god in the past. Zhan Wu had to recuperate for 180 years before he could force out the Ziwei sword energy in his body. If Empress Ziwei was not completely dead and the arrow in her chest was pulled out to wake her up, the consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, the 3 brothers were using Elder Yang's life to force Qin Hao to pull out the Sunset Divine Arrow. Sure. Qin Hao agreed without hesitation. He raised his head and looked at Mu Yue, his heart filled with mixed feelings. But to be honest, there was probably no other person in the world who was suitable to pull out the Sunset Divine Arrow. After the Sunset Divine Arrow was shot, it carried an intense destructive power. The power of the arrow would freeze on the victim's body for a very long time. Therefore, once the arrow was shot, the victim would either be killed or injured. And the injuries would be aggravated by the arrow. In the end, the person who was hit by the arrow would still die. Only Qin Hao, who was most familiar with the Sunset Divine Arrow, could use a special method to avoid the arrow's backlash and successfully retrieve the arrow. As for Zhan Wu, because he did not know the Sunset Divine Art, forcefully retrieving the arrow would definitely cause him to be injured. Qin Hao was about to retrieve the arrow when his gaze fell on Mu Yue again. He was stunned. A strange light flashed in his eyes as if he had discovered something. Young master, old man has been a burden to you for too long. This time, I would rather die than let their evil scheme succeed. Run, quickly run. Unexpectedly, Elder Yang became abnormally agitated when he saw Qin Hao move. An intense orange light erupted from his body. Shit! Seeing this, Wu Linglong hurriedly threw Old Master Yang out. Rumble! As soon as he left his hand, Elder Yang self-detonated in the air. The last High Clan elder was killed. He chose not to be a burden to Qin Hao. Creak! Qin Hao's hand that was reaching for the arrow had blue veins bulging. He gradually clenched his fist and squeezed through his teeth. Wu Lilong, sorry, that old man lost control of his emotions. His thirst for death was out of my expectations. However, it does not change the outcome of you pulling out the arrow. Quickly scram and pull out the arrow." Wu Lilong waved his hand, completely ignoring Qin Hao's anger. He shouted domineeringly as if Qin Hao was a puppet that he could control at will. It was also as if Elder Yang was a piece of trash that was thrown out. There was no difference between being alive and being dead. Chapter 682. Good timing. If I don't show you who's boss, you won't be obedient. Big brother, second brother, don't interfere. Watch how I teach him to be an obedient dog. Wu Lilong laughed unscrupulously. He had been unhappy with Qin Hao ever since they set off, so he had long wanted to fight with him. Now, it was time for him to show off his might. He brazenly charged forward, running like the wind, leaving a trail of dust behind him. His right palm slammed heavily towards Qin Hao's head. His palm was filled with king-level yuan qi. Seeing this, Wu Lida and Wu Lihu could not help but smile. Third brother still could not change his competitive style. Whether it was in the East Continent or after coming to Western Liang, he was always the one who rushed the fastest. Since Qin Hao was regarded as prey by third brother, the two of them were too embarrassed to make a move. Otherwise, wouldn't they be looking down on Wu Lilang? In fact, they had never considered that Wu Lilang would fail. The two of them even began to bet on how many moves Qin Hao could take from Wu Lilong. That Qin brat will be defeated within 3 moves. Wu Lida pointed forward and spoke with great confidence. He was still conservatively estimating that he might be defeated in 2 moves. Big brother, you think too highly of him. Even though that kid has exchanged a blow with Brother Wolf, he is still very powerful. But if we really fight, I will definitely be crippled in front of third brother, ha ha ha. Wu Lihu raised his head and laughed. He had absolute confidence in his brother. Xi Liang was poor, and the quality of their martial artists could not be compared to that of the East Continent. Even though they were both 1-star Yuan monarchs, their vital energy was no match for Wu Lilong. Moreover, Qin Hao was only a sky sage. The next scene confirmed Wu Lihu's guess. However, the result was the opposite. Saliva dripped from Wu Lilong's mouth as he ran as fast as he could. When he collided with the enraged Qin Hao, the 2 clouds of dust collided and the momentum spread out in all directions. It was extremely shocking. While they were fighting, Qin Hao's right hand formed a sword finger and pointed forward. However, it was not the golden finger, but a fleeting sword. He wielded a sword with his finger. Puchi! A sharp sword light pierced through Wu Lilong's right palm. Wu Lilong felt as if a ferocious beast was attacking him. The violent qi it brought with it bombarded his chest, shattering his cultivation and shattering his internal organs. Then, he felt a chill in his throat. Qin Hao had already turned into an afterimage and flashed in front of him. At this moment, the wind stopped and the dust dissipated. Wu Lilong maintained his attacking posture. His palm was extended forward, revealing a bloody hole in the center of his palm. He opened his mouth wide and moved his throat. Strange gurgling sounds came from his throat. His pupils were dilated and his eyes were filled with disbelief. As if he wanted to ask, why? But he didn't have the chance to speak. A fountain of blood gushed out from his throat, and a wound as big as a baby's mouth appeared on his throat. It was as if his throat had been cut by a sharp sword. Wu Lilong fell to the ground. A 1-star Yuan monarch had been defeated in 1 move. Trash, like you don't have the right to make me use my sword. Qin Hao also maintained his attacking posture. His outstretched finger pointed at Wu Lida and Wu Lihu's position as he said coldly, "Next, it's your turn." Boom. The 2 of them seemed to have been struck by lightning. Defeated. Their third brother had been defeated. Right in front of their eyes, he had been killed by a Western Liang ant in 1 move. The 2 of them immediately choked on their laughter. It was as uncomfortable as it could get. Then, uncontrollable roars of anger could be heard. Third brother. Wu Lida's tears flowed like a fountain. Kid, I'm going to skin you alive today to comfort my third brother's soul in heaven. Wu Lihu's red eyes widened. He gritted his teeth and clenched his fist. Skin you? I wonder who will skin who in the end. Qin Hao would not be frightened by Wu Lihu's rough face. Arrogant! Wu Lida was so angry that he laughed. He stretched his right hand to the side and slowly stepped toward Qin Hao. The golden flame sky extinction spear appeared in his palm. The tip of the spear burned with golden flames. He waved the spear at Qin Hao and said, How dare you fart so loudly in front of me, a 7-star Yuan monarch? I really have to admire your ignorance. Courage. You're not only facing my big brother, a coquettish 7-star Yuan monarch, but also me, a level 5 Yuan monarch who has cultivated the invincible Vajra body. Let me tell you a secret, kid. I'm a genius with an essence soul. Wu Lihu shouted. His essence energy immediately surged, and the raging essence energy exploded his clothes. As the tattered cloth fluttered in the air, streaks of domineering tiger stripes appeared on his body, making him look like a lifelike and ferocious tiger. Shortly after, the phantom of a ferocious tiger appeared behind him. At this moment, Wu Lihu was filled with a wild aura. This aura alone was enough to make ordinary people kneel and beg for mercy. Invincible Vajra body? Qin Hao frowned slightly. He noticed that Wu Lihu's defense was rapidly increasing. The other party's tiger essence soul seemed to have a strong defensive ability. It would be very difficult to break it. But no matter what, Qin Hao was going to be besieged by 2 Yuan monarchs. Wu Lida had a high-grade monarch weapon, and Wu Lihu had an essence soul. Both of them were at a higher realm than Qin Hao. This battle was destined to be dangerous. But so what? Come and fight. Qin Hao took a firm horse stance and let out a deep roar that sounded like the cry of a dragon king. Suddenly, a golden light bloomed around him. 100-meter-long flying dragon spiraled out of his body and suspended above Qin Hao's head. It faced Wu Lida and Wu Lihu opposite him, and let out an earth-shattering roar as if it was declaring war. This made the two of them stunned. No wonder. It turns out that you also have an essence soul. My third brother did not die in vain. You have the capital to be arrogant. Wu Lida finally figured it out. This explained why Qin Hao could kill a 1-star Yuan monarch like Wu Lilong. Moreover, this kid's essence soul is a dragon. He clearly can't get along with my tiger essence soul. Wu Lihu's tiger face was distorted as he said hatefully. He looked at Qin Hao with a hatred that was comparable to killing his father. Make your move. Qin Hao did not talk nonsense. He placed his hands on top of his head and poured a vast amount of vitality into the flying dragon's essence soul, making it more substantial. Flying Dragon Vortex Slash. Facing a pincer attack from 2 people, Qin Hao had no choice but to be cautious. He chose to use his ultimate move. Of course, it was just a small warm-up move. Eat my spear. Golden Flame Massacre. As Wu Lida shouted, he flew into the air and struck the ground with his spear. The spearhead spewed out blazing golden flames toward Qin Hao. The golden flames were extremely powerful. Qin Hao had seen it before. It could even penetrate the 10,000-year-old Frosty Iron King. If he took it head-on, he would be at a disadvantage. He chose to dodge and used his water wind step. Qin Hao held onto the vitality gathered above his head and quickly pulled back to distance himself. Haha, kid, don't ignore my existence. You want to dodge? Can you dodge? Splitting Tiger Immortal Hug. Suddenly, Wu Lihu's loud voice was heard. He crawled on all fours and leaped toward Qin Hao's head like a fierce tiger running through a mountain stream. He opened his arms in midair, as if he wanted to hug Qin Hao. His speed was so fast that Qin Hao had no chance to retreat. If he was hugged by Wu Lihu's thick and big striped arms, Most people would not be able to bear it and would most likely be hugged to death. Go for me. Without any hesitation, Qin Hao swung his hands forward. The flying dragon infused with primordial qi flew towards the falling Wu Lihu and accurately hit its target. At the same time, Wu Lida's golden flames of heaven extinction also spewed out and hit Qin Hao's position. Boom! Amidst the deafening explosion, a figure in a sorry state was blasted out of the smoke and dust. Qin Hao's feet left scratches on the ground, and his arms were crossed to protect his head. His forearms were covered with dense dragon scales, and the gaps between the dragon scales were filled with blood. Although there was blood, it was not a big deal. As Qin Hao lowered his arms, the dragon scales disappeared, but the skin on his arms was cracked. He blocked it. In midair, Wu Lida was particularly surprised. Although this golden flame only used 50% of his vitality, it should be enough to kill Qin Hao. I still underestimated your dragon soul. However, the next attack will leave you without a corpse, Wu Lida said and looked at Wu Lihu's position. If it weren't for Wu Lihu holding Qin Hao back and taking the blow, it was very likely that the golden flame would have been dodged. But second brother should be fine, right? After all, he was a level 5 Yuan monarch with a tiger soul. The defense of the tiger soul was amazing. Ha ha ha, it doesn't hurt or itch. You're so weak. Wu Lida was finally relieved when he heard Wu Lihu's bold and unrestrained laughter. Wu Lihu, who was hit by the vortex sky slash, did not have a single wound on his body. Qin Hao's attack did not have any effect. At this moment Wu Lihu patted his belly, his face full of pride. He was also full of contempt for Qin Hao. He shook his head and said, "Your dragon soul is simply trash." The corners of Qin Hao's mouth twitched and his eyebrows furrowed. The other party's cooperation was very close. One was good at offense and the other was good at defense. They were both outstanding in their respective field. 1 against 2, Qin Hao was weak and obviously could not win. How about it, kid? I'll give you one last chance. Obediently pull out the arrow, and then kill yourself in front of my third brother's corpse. If you do that, I can still be merciful and leave your corpse intact. This is the last mercy I can give you. Ha ha. Wu Lihu returned Qin Hao's previous words to him and felt very satisfied. Okay. Qin Hao nodded in agreement. But it's a pity that you have lost the chance to leave your corpse intact. Flaming dragon bursting flame slash. After saying that, Qin Hao raised his hands above his head again. However, the essence energy that was condensed this time was the blood-red lotus essence energy. This move again. Let me tell you a secret, kid. If you use the same move on Tiger Lord, it won't work the second time. Besides, your first attack was as weak as a pile of shit. Die for me. Splitting tiger, immortal embrace. Wu Lihu roared, opened his arms and jumped up again. He wanted to use the same trick to block Qin Hao's retreat and give his elder brother a chance to attack. Second brother, this kid's moves are a bit strange. Don't be careless. Wu Lida could feel that Qin Hao's realm had not changed at all, but his essence energy had turned red. Therefore, he hurriedly reminded Wu Lihu. At the same time, he imbued essence energy into the sky extinction spear again and thrust it forward. In an instant, even more turbulent golden flames erupted toward Qin Hao. After all, it was not easy for his second brother to be cannon fodder. Wu Lida cherished the opportunity to attack very much. Haha, the battle can end now. Chapter 683. The dog spirit's sudden attack startled Wu Lida, and he almost threw the sky extinguishing spear away. He swore that he had never seen such a strange demonic beast. It had thick hair, a body like a giant lion, and was incomparably vigorous. Was it a lion? But its face was extremely long, more like a wolf. No, rather than a wolf, it was more like a dog. The other party's mouth was wide open, and his eyes were wide open. He looked like a dumb dog raised by a farmer. "What the hell is this?" Wulita frowned, but he didn't dare to be careless. Based on the aura emitted by the dog spirit, this thing in front of him was a beast king. Its level was not low, and it seemed to have mutated. No matter what you are, you're just courting death by overestimating yourself. Disappear. The spear stabbed out fiercely, and the golden flames in Wulita's hand bombarded the dog spirit mercilessly like magma falling from the sky. The beast in front of him was only a rank 3 beast king and was no match for the 7-star Yuan monarch Wulita. One blow was enough to kill it. This was Wulita's extremely confident opinion. However, the dog spirit didn't slow down and was fearless. It even charged head-on toward the golden flames without a care for its own safety. Boom! The golden flames burned, but an illusory golden bell-chi shield wrapped around the dog spirit in time, blocking the raging golden flames. Under the burning of the golden flames, the golden bell-chi shield successfully burned through, and the powerful impact sent the dog spirit flying, crashing heavily to the ground. But the dog spirit wasn't killed in one blow. It even succeeded in delaying Wulita. Wulita was pinned down, but his brother Wulihu wasn't so lucky. At this moment, he was fighting against Qin Hao alone. Furthermore, Wulihu didn't care about Qin Hao's flaming dragon slash at all. He even laughed wildly. His 2 huge fists bumped against each other in front of his chest. Then, he opened up his immortal embrace and took the initiative to embrace Qin Hao's flaming dragon lotus. What a useless plaything! Let Grandpa Hu crush it with one blow. Wulihu hugged the flame dragon tightly as if he had found a treasure. In response, Qin Hao cast a sad look at him. The next second, the red lotus flame dragon was indeed hugged by Wulihu. But after it entered his arms, he found that the red flame dragon in his arms was incomparably irritable. It was not as fragile as the previous dragon soul. Wulihu tightened his arms and burst forth with all his strength. The tiger soul behind him let out a sky-shaking roar, wanting to use all its strength to strangle the flame dragon in his arms until it vanished into thin air. Not only did he fail, but roar! A dragon's roar reverberated through the air. The flame dragon broke free from Wulihu's embrace and circled around his body in the next second, entangling Wulihu. Then, it began to spin rapidly. Its sharp dragon claws were like tens of thousands of swords, accompanied by poochie-poochie sounds. Wulihu's flesh flew all over the place, and his limbs were scattered all over the place. He was skinned and dismembered while he was still alive, and he let out a miserable scream. Before he died, he tried to use the essence energy of a 5-star Yuan monarch to resist. However, the red flames of the flame dragon were extremely corrosive. They entered his body through his wounds, destroyed his meridians, and corroded his internal organs. In front of the red lotus dragon, the black tiger was even worse than a sick cat. It could only be slaughtered. In a short moment, he had turned into minced meat. Just as Qin Hao had said, leaving a complete corpse had become an extravagant hope. Boom! Wulita, who was in midair, was shocked once again. He stared in disbelief at the minced meat on the ground below. That was his brother. Just a moment ago, he had been standing in front of him and calling him Big Brother. Wulihu's bold and unrestrained laughter even echoed in Wulita's ears. However, in the blink of an eye, he had followed his third brother and was killed by Qin Hao once again. In addition to grief, Wulita was also very surprised. He had to re-evaluate Qin Hao's ability. The combat strength of the young man in front of him had far exceeded his own realm. After a long time, Wulita, who was extremely depressed, let out a loud cry. He held the sky extinction spear and raised his head to roar. The 3 of them had been hiding in western Liang for more than 10 years. Today, he was the only one left. 1 against 2? This time, it's our turn. Qin Hao smiled tacitly at the dog spirit beside him and observed his injuries. With the golden bell shield blocking the sky extinction golden flames, the dog spirit was not seriously injured. However, the impact caused by Wu Lida's spear seemed to have a considerable impact on the dog spirit. Fortunately, the situation was reversed in an instant. Qin Hao and the dog spirit had the absolute advantage in terms of numbers. Boy, today I want to live. You're going to skin me alive, right? Please, I'm tired of hearing that. Fight faster. Qin Hao got into a fighting stance. The seriousness on his face did not lessen in the slightest. Wu Lida's realm was much higher than his. He also held the sky extinction spear. 2 of his brothers had just died. This was the most ruthless time of his life. While speaking, Qin Hao and the dog spirit looked at each other and sent out a signal to attack together. Haha, you want to turn the tables by relying on a long-haired idiot dog? Don't be delusional. So what if it's 1 against 2? I'll let you see my true terrifying strength. I'll let you and your big wolf dog accompany my 2 brothers in death. Wu Lida's ferocious nature erupted. He no longer wanted Qin Hao to pull out the arrow. He only wanted Qin Hao's life. Although he did not understand why he could not kill the dog spirit in 1 blow, he thought that Qin Hao must have used some trump card to protect the other party. However, this trump card was probably the young man's limit. No matter how strong Qin Hao's ability to challenge those of a higher realm was, he was definitely not a match for him with the Sky Extinction Spear. Sky Extinction Slash. After considering this, Wu Lida burst out with full strength. He grabbed the Sky Extinction Spear and swung it down from above his head, throwing it at Qin Hao on the ground. The Sky Extinction Spear cut through the sky, sweeping out a 100-meter-long crescent-shaped aura. It surged over violently, mixed with the power to shatter the heavens and split the earth. This blow was no small matter. If hit, even if Qin Hao had the dragon scales to protect his body, he would definitely die or be crippled. It's time to witness your divine might. Great Void Sword. In the midst of the explosive shout, Qin Hao stood facing the crescent-shaped aura. The attack had not yet blasted over, but the pressure had already pressed on, forming a blade-sharp wind that cut off a few strands of Qin Hao's hair. Qin Hao seemed to be petrified, completely unmoved. He stretched out his right palm to the side, and a strange light flickered in his palm, as if summoning something. The crescent-shaped aura descending from the sky was getting closer and closer. The sky was covered with dark clouds, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The crackling lightning was like a cobweb in the night. Not only was it terrifying, but it also made the world that had been silent for 600 years involuntarily tremble. Roar! The dog spirit seemed very anxious, its front paws restlessly throwing dirt under its body. Qin Hao had not made any moves so far. Perhaps he was holding back a big move. However, in the face of such a stormy attack, it was very doubtful that Qin Hao's strange sword, forged with the will of the Emperor and sharpened with the red lotus soul fire for 3 days and 3 nights, could block it. Therefore, it was ready to make a save. It was also at this time that the crescent-shaped slash in the sky finally fell. And in Qin Hao's right palm, a sword shape formed by the convergence of light had completely taken shape. It was about 3 feet long and looked like a long thorn. Its entire body was sparkling and translucent like emerald jade. It was very beautiful. Although the thorn had no edge, the edges were burning with blood-like flames. Then, Qin Hao opened his eyes, and his aura suddenly increased rapidly. 6th level Heavenly Saint. 7th level Heavenly Saint. 8th level. Chapter 684. Sun-Chasing Heavenly Rainbow. With an earth-shattering roar, Qin Hao held his sword with both hands and slashed at the air. Sun-Chasing Heavenly Rainbow was a high Emperor-grade sword technique, the second move of the Crepe Myrtle Heavenly Rainbow Sword. It was more destructive than the first move, Graceful Sword. In front of Vivian, Qin Hao wanted to use the crepe myrtle heavenly rainbow sword technique to kill all of Zhan Wu's subordinate. As he swung his sword, the great void divine sword emitted a dazzling sword light. The sword light contained the might of a divine artifact and ancient aura. Like a fan closing together, it formed a giant sword aura that was hundreds of meters long. The sword aura tore through space and whizzed toward Wu Lida's crescent spear light. Bang! 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 When the two collided, it was like two planets colliding. A layer of resplendent light burst out. The light swept out like a hurricane, shaking heaven and earth. After the attack, Qin Hao's heavenly rainbow sword aura was shattered. Although Wu Lida's half-moon spear light was broken into two halves, these two halves of broken half-moon energy still fell towards Qin Hao's position. Qin Hao shouted. His sword moved like a shadow. With two clangs, he swung his sword and shook off the two remnants of the crescent energy. Although the remnant energy was shaken off, Qin Hao felt his palms go numb. His chest felt like it had been hit by a huge rock, and he flew backward involuntarily. After a somersault, Qin Hao couldn't hold back a mouthful of blood and sprayed it on his chest. The web between his thumb and index finger where he held the sword cracked, and blood flowed down the sword hilt. The difference in their cultivation levels was too great. Even though Qin Hao used an emperor-grade sword technique, he was still injured. If not for the great void divine sword's material, the two remnants of the crescent energy would have been enough to seriously injure him. How is this possible? Compared to Qin Hao's injury, Wu Lida was shocked. An 8th-level heavenly sage had actually blocked the full-strength attack of a 7-star Yuan monarch. That was his full strength. The divine wilderness continent never lacked geniuses. Wu Lida had seen many geniuses in the East continent who could challenge people 1, 2, or even 3 levels above them. However, they had never seen someone like Qin Hao, who was able to surpass an entire realm and block an opponent's all-out attack. A level 8 heavenly sage was battling a 7-star Yuan monarch. It was no wonder that Qin Hao could kill a 5-star Yuan monarch, Wu Lihu. It was easy to imagine how Wu Lida felt at this moment. His heart was pounding. He didn't even dare to think about it before. However, a miracle was right in front of his eyes. He could not guess what kind of terrifying existence Qin Hao would be when he grew up. Perhaps he would be able to threaten the battled arch. Although I consumed the Monarch Spirit Elixir that I refined during the Alchemy Master competition, it is still too much for me to fight against a level 7 Yuan monarch. Qin Hao smiled helplessly, but he was not discouraged. A heaven sage versus a Yuan king. This was enough to make all the geniuses in the continent blush with shame. So what if he was injured? In front of Vivian, the enemy must die. Creak. Qin Hao ignored his bleeding palm and gripped his sword with all his might. He leaped into the air and shouted, "Brother dog!" Roar. The dog spirit spread its wide wings and pushed the soil away with its claws. Its body bounced up and carried Qin Hao on its back in time. Soon after, the man and beast merged into one and charged toward Wu Lida. The exciting scene made one's blood boil. Arrogant brat who doesn't know when to stop. I will definitely kill you with this attack. After the shock, Wu Lida was even more determined to kill Qin Hao. Such a monstrous and brave young man could not be allowed to live in this world. He raised his spear above his head and essence chi gushed out. A red glow enveloped Wu Lida's body, making the Sky Extinction spear in his hand look as if it had been refined. Sky Fire Meteor. After his roar, Wu Lida swung his spear. Tens of thousands of golden flames shot towards Qin Hao like a dense swarm of fireflies. Midway, those tiny fireflies suddenly expanded into huge golden fireballs, filling the sky like meteors. There was nowhere to hide. However, Qin Hao did not need to hide. He had no chance of winning if he fought with his technique. He had to break through the dense attacks in front of him and fight Wu Lida head-on. Relying on the sharpness of the great void sword and his demigod body, once he tore off his opponent's hair, He could smash Wu Lida to death even if he just smashed his fist. In other words, the difference in their realms was too great and essence chi was not easy to use. Qin Hao had to break through all techniques with brute force. Boom, boom, boom. The meteor-like fireballs in front of him kept crashing. Qin Hao gritted his teeth and quickly slashed and destroyed them with his sword. Although every time he destroyed a fireball, his palm would ache and his palm would split open, causing blood to flow faster, he could not stop. Once he stopped, Qin Hao would definitely die. Roar. The dog spirit's speed was severely hindered. It stopped in midair and could not move an inch. Every time Qin Hao destroyed a fireball, the vibrating power caused the dog spirit to involuntarily retreat. Its body was too big. If this continued, it would definitely not be able to pass through Wu Lida's dense attack. Even if it did, Qin Hao's strength would not be enough to kill it. The dog spirit roared and suddenly turned around, throwing Qin Hao off. Then, it spread its wings and used its back to block the incoming fireballs. Roar! In an extremely dangerous moment, the dog spirit roared at Qin Hao, as if saying, "Go, use me as a shield and kill that bastard." Qin Hao closed his eyes and shouted. Immediately, his left hand pressed against the dog spirit's stomach as if he was pushing against a wall. He hid behind the dog spirit and rushed toward the flowing fire in the sky. Bang! 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 Thousands of golden flames exploded on the dog spirit's back and wings. Gradually, its fur was burned, and cracks began to appear on its skin, which was as hard as steel. The cracks gradually turned into wounds, and the wounds continued to expand. Then, the golden flames hit it again, and some even penetrated the wounds. Looking up from the ground, the dog spirit looked like a smoking airplane. However, it did not groan in pain. Instead, it roared nonstop as if it had taken stimulant. That roar was like a warhammer hitting Qin Hao's heart, telling him to fight. 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 On the other hand, Qin Hao was unscathed because he was protected by the dog spirit. He maintained his abundant strength. Gradually, they withstood the pressure in front of them and got closer and closer to Wu Lida's position. It was only when Qin Hao felt the dog spirit's vitality draining away that he let out an earth-shattering roar. He jumped higher into the air and leaped above Wu Lida's head. Then, he slashed down with his sword. As for the dog spirit, it fell with its body in tatters. How is this possible? Wu Lida looked at this hot-blooded scene. He could not imagine that a mere rank 3 beast king could take his ultimate move with its physical body. Moreover, it succeeded. When the truth was in front of him, he had no time to think. Qin Hao slashed down with his sword, drawing out a bloody flame. Stupid! Wu Lida roared, not taking Qin Hao's attack seriously at all. After all, their first exchange had proven that Qin Hao's vitality was not as strong as his. He grinned and flicked his spear. A golden flame spewed out from the top of his head. He believed that if Qin Hao took another hit, he would die without a doubt. He was just waiting for an exhausted enemy to arrive. Qin Hao did not care at all. He slashed down with bloodshot eyes. Chapter 685. This caused Wu Lida to let out a strange cry of horror. Qin Hao's sword seemed to be an extremely extraordinary existence. He had underestimated the power of Qin Hao's sword. Without hesitation, Wu Lida swung his spear and quickly smashed it at Qin Hao. Clang! The sword and spear clashed together, making an extremely dull sound of hammering iron. The sound rolled across the sky, creating ripples in the void. This collision was completely a competition of the two's pure physical strength. Qin Hao raised his head and spat out a mouthful of blood. After his body received the recoil, he was like a falling leaf, somersaulting and flying into the clouds uncontrollably. Moreover, a rain of blood fell down. It was obvious that his injuries were not light. Puff! Wu Lida was even more uncomfortable. Blood flowed uncontrollably from his mouth for hundreds of meters. The head-on collision with Qin Hao had almost paralyzed his entire body. He fell from the sky in a sorry state, leaving behind an afterimage. With a piercing sound, he plunged into the soil below, shaking up the dust in the air. Inside, the ground had sunk 10 meters deep. Dig. Wu Lida lay in the mud pit, vomiting mouthful after mouthful of blood. It was as if he was going to vomit out his internal organs. He was completely out of control. Not only was his mouth spurting blood, but even his eyes, nostrils, ears, and even a certain excretory hole in the middle of his buttocks were spurting out blood 10 meters away. The scene was spectacular to the extreme. In an instant, he was covered in blood. He actually has such a terrifying physical strength. It's far beyond my expectations. What a monster-like existence. Wu Lida hurriedly swallowed a few bottles of elixirs, slightly alleviating the intense pain all over his body. Then, he supported himself with the sky-extinguishing spear and stood up trembling. His legs were like two noodles that couldn't stop shaking. This time, he had truly experienced the terror of Qin Hao's physical strength. In all fairness, if it weren't for his realm being so much higher than Qin Hao's, he would have been smashed into meat paste by Qin Hao if they were at the same level. But no matter what, he had survived and would not give Qin Hao a second chance to get close to him. In fact, Qin Hao did not have a second chance. When Wu Lida struggled to stand up, a sharp sound came from the sky. Then, Qin Hao fell in front of him. Just like him, he was covered in blood. But Qin Hao couldn't get up. Ha ha! I won, I finally defeated this incomparably troublesome brat, ah! When Wu Lida saw Qin Hao's miserable state, he couldn't help but let out a carefree howl. It was as if defeating a heavenly saint was the most glorious thing in his life. Roar! In the distance, the dog spirit with bloody holes all over its body struggled a few times, trying to stand up, but it did not succeed. It anxiously roared in Qin Hao's direction, trying to awaken his consciousness. However, Qin Hao did not make a move. All of this is finally over. Making an enemy out of me, the great Wu Lida, is the biggest mistake in your life. Now pay with your life for my second and third brothers. As soon as Wu Lida finished speaking, he limped toward Qin Hao. When he reached his side, he immediately pointed the tip of the spear downward. Holding the sky extinction spear tightly, he aimed it at Qin Hao's head. As long as he easily stabbed it down, he would be able to kill the evildoer in front of him. Sorry to disturb you, but do you know when you took the sky extinction spear from Tuoba Feihao? Why did you succeed? Suddenly, when the glittering tip of the spear was about to pierce Qin Hao's head, Qin Hao suddenly raised his head and smiled at Wu Lida with his blood-stained face. Thump! Wu Lida's heart skipped a beat. The evildoer was still alive? However, Wu Lida seemed to be possessed. At this moment, he couldn't help but think along with Qin Hao's question. When he successfully took the sky extinction spear from Tuoba Feihao, he also felt very strange. Tuoba Feihao was much stronger than Wu Lida. He was on the same level as his ancestor, Wu Lili, and was an emperor-level powerhouse. Although Tuoba Feihao was besieged and seriously injured to the point of no return, he should not have been killed by Wu Lida, who was a Yuan king. After all, even if an emperor-level powerhouse was on his last breath, he could still kill a king like an ant. At this moment, an image appeared in Wu Lida's mind. He vaguely remembered that when he killed Tuoba Feihao, the other party had launched a last-ditch effort to activate the sky extinction golden flame before his death. For some reason, while Tuoba Feihao was channeling his power, his movements suddenly paused, as if he had suffered some kind of backlash. Wu Lida took advantage of the moment when Tuoba Feihao paused to successfully kill him. In the days after, he would often brag about this as a source of pride. But why was Qin Hao asking about this? Furthermore, damn, how do you know about Tuoba Feihao from the East Continent? Who the hell are you? Suddenly, Wu Lida sobered up and looked at Qin Hao at his feet in shock. Because I'm his master, Qin Hao said in a hoarse voice. A bloody light flashed in his eyes, and 2 balls of red lotus flames ignited. His weak aura suddenly rose, and surging vitality wreaked havoc. Qin Hao was indeed injured just now, but his injuries were not as serious as imagined. After all, his physical body was no longer that of a mortal, but that of a demigod. It was not something Wu Lida could compare to. The reason he pretended to be dying was to lure Wu Lida over. If Wu Lida did not approach him, how could Qin Hao have the chance to kill him? So, you can accompany General Fei Hao in death. Qin Hao grasped the air, and the great void sword appeared in his palm. It emitted a dazzling light as he stabbed it toward Wu Lida's chest. You want me to die? I want you to die too. Let's see who's faster. Wu Lida did not have the time to ask about Qin Hao's identity. In the next second, he immediately stabbed the sky extinction spear. His spear was long, and he thought he had enough ability to kill Qin Hao before his chest was pierced. But suddenly, a numb feeling swept through his body. Wu Lida's limbs seemed to be cramping, and his body trembled. The spear was stuck. Even if he tried his best, he could not stab it down even an inch. Taking this opportunity, Puchi Qin Hao's sword pierced through his chest, and the great void sword pierced through his back. The powerful impact sent Wu Lida's body flying. Let me tell you a secret. Over-reliance on the sky extinction spear's golden flame inscription technique will have serious side effects on the body. It will cause the meridians to be blocked, and vitality cannot circulate. This is why General Fei Hao was killed by you. But today you also died under the backlash of the sky extinction spear. Qin Hao crawled up with difficulty and looked at Wu Lida. He blamed himself for not refining the golden flame inscription technique of the sky extinction spear in a hurry to enter the Valley of the Gods. He had exposed a flaw and caused Tuoba Fei Hao's death. But today Wu Lida had also died because of this flaw. If General Fei Hao knew, he would be very happy in the underworld. Plop. Wu Lida, who had been pierced by the great void sword, fell to the ground. His eyes were wide open as he died. A level 7 Yuan monarch dead. Silence. The scene was completely silent. The surroundings were full of potholes from the battle. He had killed 1-star, 5-star, and even 7-star Yuan monarchs. This battle had been extremely dangerous for Qin Hao. Fortunately, the 3 Wu brothers were all dead. Qin Hao gasped for breath. His body was exhausted to the extreme, and he was also extremely weak. But he did not have the time to rest. He clutched his chest and staggered toward Dog Spirit. Brother Dog's injuries were critical and needed immediate treatment. If it had not acted as a meat shield and blocked Wu Lida's flying flame meteor, Qin Hao would not have had a chance to win. But suddenly, when he took his first step, a loud clap of thunder sounded in this silent space, and the void seemed to be torn apart. From the crack, a figure with a terrifying aura appeared and let out a monstrous roar. Who killed my Wu Lily's descendant? I will massacre your entire family. Chapter 686. To him, this roar was too familiar. It had been a long time since he had last heard it. He had a premonition that Wu Lily was still alive, but he had never expected him to appear at such a critical moment. At this moment, both Qin Hao and the Dog Spirit were covered in wounds from the repeated attacks. They were extremely weak and had no strength to continue fighting. The figure in the crack in the 9th heaven fell to the ground. The moment his feet touched the ground, the earth trembled. He was a bald old man with a drooping face. He looked extremely old and skinny. However, that skinny body contained an incomparably powerful strength. It was as if he was standing still, but if he moved, he could shatter mountains and rivers. This aura was restrained to the extreme. Only a first-rate expert of the continent could possess such an aura. Ordinary people would not be able to see through it. Qin Hao quietly stood in place, looking at the old man in front of him. In the blink of an eye, 600 years had passed. Wu Lili was no longer the awe-inspiring youth clad in armor. However, the ruthlessness on his face was even more terrifying than before. Wu Lili wore no clothes. His entire body was only covered by a small leather skirt with a leopard pattern around his waist. A huge scar that looked like a worm slithered across his forehead. It cut across his entire face and extended all the way to his lower abdomen. Judging from the scar, it was caused by a sword. There was also a fist-sized circular scar on his chest. It was obvious that someone had pierced through his chest with a sword. That sword must have almost taken his life. However, in the end, he had stubbornly survived. His vitality was terrifying. After Wu Lida landed, his gaze first landed on Mu Yue, who was quietly floating in the air. An intense fear flashed through his eyes. He subconsciously touched the huge scar on his face and felt a sharp pain in his chest. He knew that the pain was an illusion and not real. However, cold sweat still dripped down his forehead. The shadow of death lingered in his heart. The sword scar on his body and the attack that pierced through his chest were all caused by Empress Ziwei. At that time, he had chased after Empress Ziwei, who had been shot by an arrow. She had used her last breath to completely defeat them. Had it not been for Wu Lili's timely escape and the help of his companions, he would not have survived to this day. Even though he had survived, the sword wound that Empress Ziwei had inflicted on him had tormented him for 600 years. Even now, he still hadn't fully recovered. At the beginning of every month, the sword wound would relapse and the wound would burst open, making him wish he was dead. This was the reason why Wu Lili had not returned to the East Continent for the past 600 years. He was seriously injured and did not have the ability to return. He had been hiding in the deep mountains and forests of western Liang, suppressing himself at all times. In the past 600 years, not only had his cultivation not improved at all, it had even regressed due to the torment of the sword wound. Until now, his cultivation had yet to return to the pinnacle of the 7-star primitive emperor realm. He had been stuck at the 2nd stage primitive emperor realm all this while. At this moment, it was easy to imagine how intense his fear of Mu Yue was, even though Mu Yue had already lost her life. Wu Lili took a deep breath and forcibly dispelled the shadow in his heart. Then, his gaze landed on Qin Hao. He looked at Qin Hao as if he was looking at an ant. Just a moment ago, Wu Lili had been suppressing his injuries in his cave as usual. Coincidentally, it was the beginning of the month and the sword wound would relapse. Suddenly, his mind shook as he sensed that someone had touched the ceiling and sensing array that he had set up. This meant that someone had found the location of the treasure in the catacombs and most likely found Empress Ziwei, who had sunk underground. At that moment, Wu Lili was filled with excitement. He guessed that the person who had touched the catacombs array was most likely sent by the East Continent's Battle Emperor. Moreover, the person who had been sent was most likely his own descendant. This was because only the descendants of his Wu Lili bloodline had the ability to break the sensing array. Wu Lili was extremely excited as he tried his best to suppress his injuries. He couldn't wait to see his descendants. Finally, the Battle Emperor had sent someone over. He could finally return to the East Continent. However, when Wu Lili suppressed his sword wound and tore through space to teleport over, at first glance, he saw the corpses of Wu Lida and Wu Lilong. As an Emperor-level powerhouse, he could recognize his own bloodline just by the blood qi. The blood qi emitted from the mangled flesh on the ground was also his bloodline. This meant that 3 of his descendants had come here. Unfortunately, all 3 of them had been killed. The only one who had survived was this young man in front of him. Wu Lili couldn't sense any bloodline aura from this young man. It was you who killed my 3 descendants? Wu Lili asked with a sullen expression. Although he was furious, he appeared very calm. Isn't that nonsense? In response, Qin Hao smiled coldly. The truth was right in front of him. Wu Lili was stunned. The corner of his mouth twitched. He nodded angrily and said, "Very good. You have the guts to admit that you're the murderer in front of the old man. You've got guts. I don't care who you are. Next, are you ready to suffer my wrath? I'll make you wish you were dead. I'll skin you alive." "You? Peel off my tender skin?" "Sorry, that's what all 3 of your descendants said. In the end, they all died. One of them was even turned into mincemeat by me. How sad." Qin Hao shook his head. Disappointment flashed across his face. He thought that Wu Lili would recognize him. Unfortunately, turned into mincemeat? Good. The old man won't even give you the chance to turn into mincemeat. Now disappear. Wu Lili clenched his teeth and said in a lifeless voice. He raised one of his palms above his head. A torrential force stirred the space above his head, forming a vortex in the middle of his palm. The vortex expanded rapidly. A golden ball of light condensed in the center of the vortex, emitting a power that could destroy heaven and earth. The golden yuan qi represented the identity of an primitive emperor powerhouse. Immediately, the ground rumbled from the vibration of the yuan qi. Cracks crept from the soles of Wu Lili's feet. The scene was extremely terrifying. Roar. Woof woof. A woof, the dog spirit struggled crazily in the distance. It wanted to stand up. It wanted to return to Qin Hao's side. It knew that with this attack, Qin Hao would disappear forever. How could a heavenly sage be an emperor-level powerhouse's opponent? Even if it died, it wanted to die together with Qin Hao. Second stage primitive emperor? Is this all you've got? You really disappoint me. Qin Hao shook his head and murmured in his heart. In 600 years, Wu Lili's cultivation had regressed instead of improving. It was really strange. However, even if he was a second-stage primitive emperor, Qin Hao was still no match for him. But there was still a chance. As long as he could buy some time, there was a possibility of a reversal. But could he stop Wu Lili and buy some time? "I'm counting on you." Qin Hao stretched out his right hand and held the divine void spike in his palm. Relying on the divine artifact, Qin Hao did not know if he could withstand the attack of an emperor-level powerhouse. But he had to try. At this moment, Wu Lili's golden ball of light had formed. Seeing that Qin Hao, who was only a heavenly sage, still dared to resist him, Wu Lili sneered contemptuously. "Trash die." As he spoke, Wu Lili prepared to throw the golden ball of light at Qin Hao's head. "In front of Lord Jin, you shameless old man wearing a leopard print miniskirt. You're so arrogant and you want to kill my savior. Do you think that my golden jade pavilion doesn't exist?" Chapter 687. Jin Yuxuan was sweating profusely and breathing heavily from his nostrils. His face was red from running. Chasing after Qin Hao was so difficult that he felt like he had lost 300 pounds of meat oil. He walked to the center of the field with his hands behind his back, ignoring the terrifying primitive Emperor Wu Lili in front of him. He looked at the corpses on the ground with a condescending gaze. When he saw Wu Lilong and Wu Lida's corpses, he exclaimed, These 3 ants are all dead? That's good, it saves me the trouble of killing them. Kill them." As he spoke, he nodded at Qin Hao. His eyes seemed to be saying, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Qin Hao was stunned. He didn't understand. "Huh!" Wu Lili immediately narrowed his eyes. Unconsciously, a trace of fear flashed across his heart. This unknown fatty swaggered over and wasn't afraid of him at all. Was he an idiot? Or perhaps he was a hidden expert? "Who are you?" Wu Lili asked cautiously. In order to show his friendliness, he took the initiative to disperse the energy in his palm. "Don't care who I am. I'll count to 3. Get out of here with your tail between your legs. Jin Yuxuan looked like an expert as he pointed at Wu Lily's nose. His finger was almost poking the tip of Wu Lily's nose. F***ck. This caused Qin Hao, who was standing at the side, to be stunned. He looked at Jin Yuxuan in disbelief. Based on his performance this time, Jin Yuxuan was a greedy person who loved money as much as his life. He was afraid of death to the extreme. But why did he suddenly become a different person? He actually dared to point at an primitive emperor's nose and tell him to get out. Who gave Jin Yuxuan the courage to be so arrogant? Sir, I don't care who you are. Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't meddle in old man's business. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. Wu Lily suppressed the anger in his heart. In this world, other than the battle emperor and Dendi, who had fallen, no one else was like this fatty, pointing at his nose and shouting. As he couldn't see through his opponent's cultivation, Wu Lily chose to tolerate it. Bear the consequences? Heh, all the people who used to speak such arrogant words to me are all dead. However, I'm in a good mood today and don't want to start a massacre. I'll spare your worthless life for now. Aren't you going to be grateful and get out of here right now? Jin Yuxuan glared at him and poked Wu Lily's chest with his finger. He had a dignified demeanor. This scene made Qin Hao have a whole new level of respect for him. Ahem, President Jin, I have to remind you that the old man standing in front of you is a level 2 primitive emperor. Qin Hao kindly reminded him. His intention was to tell Jin Yuxuan that this person's cultivation was monstrous. If there was nothing else, he should quickly run for his life. Otherwise, when Wu Lily went crazy, even he would not be able to save him. Second stage primitive emperor? Jin Yuxuan's heart pounded heavily in his chest, and he almost turned around and ran away in fright. However, he quickly calmed himself down and curled his lips in disgust. What second stage primitive emperor? In my eyes, you're just bullshit that can be destroyed with a flick of my finger. Your Excellency, don't be too presumptuous. Wu Lily clenched his fists and shouted. He really wanted to slap this big fatty who suddenly appeared to death. I just said a few words to you and you're unhappy? In this emperor's eyes, who do you think you are? Why don't you get out of here? Do you want to die? Jin Yuxuan's face fell. He poked Wu Lily's chest with his finger again. This almost drove Wu Lily crazy. However, he caught a very shocking word from the other party's mouth. This emperor. Only emperor-level powerhouses would call themselves this emperor. Could it be that the cultivation of this big fatty in front of him was an emperor-level powerhouse? Wu Lily was shocked by his own thoughts, and the thought of retreating flashed through his mind. However, when he saw Wu Lilong and Wu Lida's corpses on the ground, he gritted his teeth and cupped his hands towards Jin Yuxuan. Your Excellency, I have an irreconcilable enmity with the young man behind you. I hope you can give me some face and not interfere. I will definitely reward you handsomely. Slap. In response to Wu Lily, Jin Yuxuan gave him a heavy slap. He slapped Wu Lily, spitting saliva as he said angrily, Are you rebelling against me? This emperor is very clear. That young man is my benefactor, and I will definitely protect him today. Hurry up and get out of here. You want to make me angry, right? Do you believe that I will immediately get angry in front of you? Crack. This slap caused Qin Hao to be dumbfounded. He gave President Jin a thumbs up in admiration. Similarly, this slap also stunned Wu Lily. When he came back to his senses, he gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. Someone actually dared to slap him. Other than the battle Dharch and Dendi, no one had ever humiliated him like this. Even if the big fatty in front of him was really an emperor-level powerhouse, it still made Wu Lily furious. A warrior prefers death to humiliation. Your Excellency, you have gone too far. Wu Lily said angrily. Bully you? So what if I bully you? As Emperor Yuan, It is only right for me to bully an ant like you. It is your honor to bully you, and it is your good fortune to bully you. Hurry up and get out of here. Also, before you leave, please kowtow to me and admit your mistake. Lie under my crotch and calm my anger. Of course, if you are willing to be my lackey, I will still be very happy. Come, lost child, kneel in front of Lord Jean, throw yourself into my arms, beg for my forgiveness, and beg me to give you the honor of being my lackey. From now on, under Lord Jin's protection, you will be able to get whatever you want. You will be able to get whatever you want. Jin Yuxuan also started to talk non-stop. The more he talked, the more excited he became. His saliva flew everywhere as he talked. In the end, he couldn't help but open his arms to Wu Lily. He had a holy look on his face, just like a charlatan. This made Wu Lily so angry that he almost vomited blood. Lie in front of this fatty and become his lackey? His ancestors, Wu Lily's master was the battle dharch. Even if he became a lackey, he couldn't possibly lie under someone else's crotch. A dog also had dignity. Unforgivable, simply unforgivable. Even if you are an emperor-level powerhouse, I, Wu Lily, will not hesitate to give up my life to challenge you in order to defend the dignity of the battle dharch. Wu Lily was really enraged. As he spoke, turbulent golden essence energy spiraled from his body. The raging wind blew Jin Yuxuan, who was standing in front of him, back away involuntarily. If it weren't for Jin Yuxuan's body being too heavy, he would probably be directly swept up into the sky. Suddenly Qin Hao, who was at the side, became very serious. Wu Lily was going to use his killing move. He shouted at Jin Yuxuan, "President Jin, this person is very fierce, you should." Qin Hao wanted to say something but stopped. In fact, he wanted to persuade the other party to run away quickly. But because he didn't know what kind of rat poison Jin Yuxuan had up his sleeves and was messing around here like a retard, it wasn't convenient to expose him. Qin Hao only hoped that Jin Yuxuan would live wisely. "Young Master Qin, don't be afraid. Is this old man trying to scare me? Good, good, good. Since he insists on seeking death, I, the great Emperor Jin, will be merciful today and send him to the Elysium to live a carefree life." On the other hand, Jin Yuxuan didn't have the slightest intention of running away. Instead, he was competing with Wu Lily head-on. His thick right leg stomped on the ground, and his hands danced in front of his chest, making a bunch of strange moves that no one could understand. Some of his movements were even very indecent. Immediately afterward, Jin Yuxuan's aura actually surged under his strange and indecent moves. There was also a turbulent golden essence energy that suddenly spiraled around Jin Yuxuan. As soon as his aura was released, the starting point was that of an emperor-level powerhouse. Boom! A golden aura flame shield rushed out from the top of Jin Yuxuan's head. This scene gave Wu Lily a big fright. Previously, he thought that Jin Yuxuan was deliberately mystifying things, so he pretended to resist. He didn't expect that the big fatty in front of him was really a powerhouse. Although he wasn't an emperor-level powerhouse, his emperor-level cultivation was enough to compete with Wu Lily. Moreover, due to Wu Lily's injuries, there was no way for him to recover. Therefore, his strength was reduced. Wu Lily would have a hard time fighting against any primitive emperor, even if it was the lowest one-star primitive emperor. Unfortunately, Wu Lily guessed wrong again. Jin Yuxuan wasn't just a first-stage primitive emperor. As the golden essence energy climbed higher and higher, Jin Yuxuan's realm was rapidly increasing. Third-stage primitive emperor. Sixth-stage primitive emperor. Eighth stage. Ninth stage. Peak ninth stage. With a buzzing sound, it was as if a thunderbolt had descended from the sky and landed on Jin Yuxuan. When he reached the peak of ninth stage, the color of his essence energy had completely sublimated, turning from golden to platinum. The platinum essence energy was the symbol of emperor-level powerhouses in the divine wilderness continent. Jin Yuxuan didn't lie. He was indeed an emperor-level powerhouse. At this moment, Wu Lili was so scared that he was pale. He was so scared that he almost peed his pants. He regretted angering Jin Yuxuan and causing Jin Yuxuan to be unhappy. If he could do it all over again, Wu Lili swore that he would never be so rude. He would definitely treat the big fatty in front of him as his own father. Even so, Jin Yuxuan wouldn't give him a chance. Moreover, the strength of Jin Yuxuan's essence energy was still rising, as if there was no limit. First stage Primitive Emperor. Second stage Primitive Emperor. Fifth stage Primitive Emperor. Eighth stage Primitive Emperor. Ninth stage, peak ninth stage boom. Wu Lili, who was opposite him, almost knelt down. Among his ancestors, there were definitely no more than 3 ultimate stage primitive emperors in the entire continent, and they were all in the East continent. Among them, Zhan Wu, who was known as the Battle Emperor, was one of them. As he held the Sunset Divine Bow, Zhan Wu was also known as the Sunset Battle God. However, Wu Lili really didn't dare to imagine that there was actually a powerful existence comparable to a battle emperor hidden in the barren western Liang. An ultimate stage primitive emperor was comparable to a demigod who dominated the continent. Suddenly, a stinky yellow liquid flowed out from Wu Lili's crotch. His legs trembled crazily. If it wasn't for his willpower, he would have been paralyzed by Jin Yuxuan. Similarly, Qin Hao also fell into a strong shock. Judging from the current strength of Jin Yuxuan's essence energy, it was not much worse than when he hadn't cultivated the indestructible samsara technique in his previous life. Without the Sunset Divine Bow, Qin Hao didn't dare to say that he could defeat Jin Yuxuan. Could it be that this person was really a peerless powerhouse hidden in the Merchant Alliance? Something's not right. All of a sudden, Qin Hao noticed something strange. Chapter 688. Under the pressure of this monstrous cultivation, Wu Lili felt as if he had fallen into an endless abyss. His facial features were distorted as he let out an extremely suppressed and sharp howl. He knew that he was no match for Jin Yuxuan. With just a light blow, he would disappear from this world and would never be able to return to his hometown in the East continent. With the thought of facing death, Wu Lili still rushed forward. As he ran, he cried crazily, "Great War Emperor, I, Wu Lili, can no longer serve you. May my emperor reign over Daqin for thousands of years. May the glory of the war god shine on the peak of the setting sun forever." After he finished speaking, he threw a palm strike with all his might at the mountain-like, fat, round, and immovable Jin the Great. At this moment, Wu Lili's mentality collapsed. It looked like he had used all his strength, but in fact, his attack power was not as strong as Yuan King Wu Lida's. When he ran in front of Jin Yuxuan, his limbs were trembling and he had lost all his will to fight. The golden Yuan Qi gathered in his palm was so frightened that it dissipated. He closed his eyes and weakly placed his palm on Jin Yuxuan's palm. Jin Yuxuan despised this to the extreme. With a look of disdain, he put his left hand behind his back and only used his right hand to meet Wu Lili's palm. Bang! Amidst an extremely dull explosion, the two palms collided. With just one touch, Jin Yuxuan felt as if he had been hit by a wild bull. Although Wu Lili was scared out of his wits and his Yuan Qi had dissipated, Jin Yuxuan was sent flying backward. However, this slap without any fighting spirit threw Jin Yuxuan 500 feet high. His mouth was crooked and his eyes were wide open. He spat out a ball of sticky white foam. While he was flying in the air, his luxurious golden robe, which was wrapped in gold and jade, exploded into pieces in the air. He fell to the ground as if he was paralyzed. A huge pit was formed in the ground. "I'm sorry, young Master Qin. I've tried my best. How I wish to return to Luoshui and my lovely Jin Chamber of Commerce." Jin Yuxuan reluctantly spat out these words before he could regain consciousness. Then, his eyes rolled back and he fainted on the ground. Immediately after, a large amount of fat flowed out from under his body. His body was shrouded in a strange light. The light flickered for a few seconds. After it dissipated, the fat Jin Yuxuan had become a pile of skin and bones. He was as miserable as a shriveled cucumber. The entire place fell silent. When Qin Hao saw Jin Yuxuan's miserable state, he finally understood why he erupted with the terrifying aura of Emperor Yuan. There was a type of pill in the world called the breath creation pill. After consuming this pill, it can temporarily simulate the state of any expert during battle. This state can only be maintained for a quarter of an hour. Furthermore, there would be extremely terrifying side effects afterward. This side effect would consume nearly 90% of the user's physical essence. Jin Yuxuan had most likely eaten a breath creation illusionary pill to increase his aura to that of a Yuan large powerhouse. This aura was actually an illusion. Jin Yuxuan was still an ordinary person inside. Therefore, he only imitated the white gold essence energy of the Arch Yuan from the outside, but it didn't cause any abnormalities to the outside world. After the real Emperor Yuan erupted with his vitality, it would definitely shake the earth, shatter space, and even tear the sky apart. The scene would be like the end of the world. On the other hand, there wasn't even a grain of sand floating under Jin Yuxuan's feet. But there was one thing that Qin Hao didn't understand. Where did the breath creation illusionary pill in Jin Yuxuan's hands come from? To be able to let him reach the extreme realm with Emperor Yuan's aura, the person who tempered this pill must also be an emperor-level alchemist, and his realm was definitely not low. Other than Qin Hao, there didn't seem to be anyone at the level of Dendi in this world. But it seemed that Qin Hao faintly remembered that he had once refined a breath creation illusionary pill. That was 600 years ago, when he was very bored one day. How could this be? After a long time, Wu Lily, who was almost scared to death, opened his closed old eyes. But the fear in his heart didn't diminish at all. His legs were still trembling. He first looked at Jin Yuxuan, who was sent flying, in disbelief, then stared at his own palm in a daze. He actually sent Emperor Yuan, who was at the extreme realm, flying just now. What the f***ck, when did he become so amazing? Why didn't he know? Something's wrong, Wu Lily murmured very solemnly. Recalling the scene when he came into contact with Jin Yuxuan just now, he didn't feel a trace of vitality from the other party at all. And the person he hit with his palm was completely an ordinary person. Could it be? Emperor Jin is a fake? f***ck his ancestor. Wu Lily finally came to his senses. Tears flowed down his face as he flew into a rage. As one of the 3 divine guards under the battle arch, he was actually scared by a mortal, no, a garbage pig. It was simply a great humiliation. He almost knelt down in front of Jin Yuxuan just now. He was so scared that he even peed in his pants. If this matter spread to the East Continent, Wu Lily would be so ashamed that he would commit suicide in front of Zhan Wu. If I don't chop you into pieces today, grind your bones into ashes, and eat your ashes, I won't be your ancestor anymore. I won't be able to live up to this sexy leopard print skirt on my waist. Wu Lily's old face trembled with hatred. His teeth were about to shatter. Clenching his black fists, he walked step by step toward Jin Yuxuan. He had 108 ways to make Jin Yuxuan, but all of a sudden, a layer of platinum light shone from behind him. Although the light was very weak, it was indeed platinum in color. A gradually rising aura came from behind him. Also, where did that young man go? Could it be that the platinum light was— Oh, I understand now. With an incomparably cruel sneer, Wu Lily slowly turned around. That young man must be trying to use the same method to deceive the old man. But how could the old man fall for it? The same method wouldn't work on the old man a second time. These despicable and treacherous Western Liang ants deserved to die 1,000 times over. With this thought in mind, Wu Lily smiled and turned his face away. However, the white gold light he saw didn't come from Qin Hao's body. Instead, it came from a woman beside Qin Hao. This woman was the hibernating Empress Ziwei. Now that she was asleep, her eyes slowly opened. The arrow that pierced through her body had also disappeared. Wu Lily, are you ready to meet your death? Qin Hao smiled. He raised a snow-white arrow in his hand and waved it at the frightened Wu Lily. At the same time, Mu Yue's aura became stronger and stronger. The platinum energy was incomparably sacred and majestic. It lit up the entire purple world like snow. Impossible, it can't be. Her heart was destroyed by the Battle Emperor's sunset god arrow. She should have died. Even if she didn't die, 600 years should have been enough for her soul to be destroyed. How could her aura recover so quickly? Wu Lily was so frightened that he kept retreating. The platinum energy he saw this time wasn't an illusion. At this moment, he could clearly feel that the ground under his feet was trembling slightly. The air was filled with dust, and small stones were beginning to rise into the air. You're right. If a normal person was hit by the divine sunset arrow, even the Pinnacle Realm Emperor Yuan wouldn't be able to withstand the injury caused by the arrow and would definitely die. Unfortunately, Vivian isn't a normal person. Although Zhan Wu's arrow hit her left chest, Vivian's heart was in her right chest. With her cultivation base, as long as I pull out the divine sunset arrow from her body, she will naturally recover at an astonishing speed, Qin Hao said with a smile. Empress Ziwei was different from normal people. Her heart was on the right side. This was her biggest secret. In this world, other than Vivian's father, the inferior artifact emperor, only Qin Hao knew her biggest secret. Zhan Wu didn't know. Her heart is on the right side? How could this be? How could this be? How did you know? And you actually pulled out the divine sunset arrow? Even the Battle Emperor didn't have full confidence in pulling it out. Who are you? Who exactly are you? Wu Lily's finger trembled as he pointed at Qin Hao. He was almost scared out of his wits as he asked a series of terrifying questions. His eyes were bloodshot. He had already seen Mu Yue's eyes open and burst out with two soul-stirring purple lights. Her gaze seemed to be able to devour one's soul. Sorry, you should save your questions for the King of Hell. As soon as Qin Hao finished speaking, the arrow in his palm disappeared. What replaced it was a great void holy sword that was as flawless as jade. A layer of crimson flame that was as red as blood immediately wrapped around the entire sword. Qin Hao's body also exuded a mysterious power. Wu Li. Suddenly, an extremely sorrowful female voice rang out. Mu Yue completely woke up. Immediately, her phoenix robe fluttered, and surging platinum essence qi gushed out like raging wave. The platinum radiance enveloped her, making her look like a goddess descending to the world. The void suddenly trembled, and countless cracks covered the sky like tentacles. The sky changed color, the mountains collapsed, and the earth began to sink. A snow-white, 3-foot-long sword flew out from the ground. It spun in the air and landed in Empress Ziwei's hand. Immediately after, Mu Yue slashed with her sword. Purple Phoenix Ultimate Dance. Buzz. The sword qi that flew out transformed into a violently expanding white-gold storm. Within the storm, a divine phoenix let out a high-pitched cry and spread its wings that blotted out the sun. Rolling destructive power surged as it swept towards Wu Lily. Rainbow Dragon breaks the sun! Qin Hao roared at the same time. His left hand touched the great void divine sword's body, and the flames on the sword burned even more fiercely than ever before. Qin Hao followed closely behind Mu Yue with the same action and sword move. He slashed out a wave of sword qi. The sword qi also turned into a hurricane. In the hurricane, a dragon roared and coiled, majestic and mighty, flying side by side with the phoenix. Perhaps in terms of the power of the sword Qin Hao's current level was completely incomparable to Empress Ziwei's. But in terms of momentum, they were not inferior at all. In fact, the dragon was even stronger than the phoenix. Then, an even more spectacular scene appeared. Just as the two sword Qis were about to hit Wu Lili, the two sword Qis merged into one. The dragon and the phoenix intertwined, and the hurricane merged to form an even more vast tornado that seemed to be able to break through the heavens. Boom! 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 The destructive power exploded on Wu Lili, who was stunned and unable to react in time. Chapter 689. The conditions for fusing martial techniques together were extremely harsh. The slightest mistake could lead to a huge loss. The slightest carelessness could result in serious injuries to the two practitioners. It required extremely high martial arts talent as well as the innate perfect tacit understanding between both parties. Qin Hao and Mu Yue were the kind of people who were 1 in a million and had a tacit understanding between them. A subtle glance was enough for them to understand each other's thoughts. Empress Ziwei alone was enough to kill Wu Lili 1,000,000 times over. Moreover, this attack was enhanced by Qin Hao's Red Lotus Soul Fire and Dragon Soul. Wu Lili did not have the slightest chance to escape. He did not even have the consciousness to dodge. He was trapped in place by Mu Yue's Emperor-level mind power. He could only widen his eyes and welcome the arrival of death. Then, accompanied by an earth-shattering roar, a raging mushroom cloud rose from where he was standing. The roars of the huge flying dragon and divine phoenix gradually dissipated in the mushroom cloud. At this moment, this buried world finally couldn't withstand the combined might of Qin Hao and Mu Yue, and began to collapse. The ground quickly cracked open and lava spewed out in all directions. The sky began to fall. Amidst the smoke, a broken head fell to the ground. It was Wu Lili's head. Empress Ziwei's heart is on the right side. How can there be such a bizarre thing in this world? How ironic! Wu Lili's eyes were still wide open. They were filled with resentment and frustration. 600 years ago, in the East Continent's Daqin imperial capital, the Battle Emperor and Empress Ziwei had engaged in a battle of life and death because of Dendi. Wu Lili had paid a heavy price to shoot the Sunset Divine Arrow. He had thought that this arrow would definitely kill the other party. Today, Wu Lili realized that it was all in vain. Who would have thought that Empress Ziwei's heart was on the right side? It could be said that this arrow not only lost the arrow, but also caused Zhan Wu to be heavily injured. He had tried to gain an advantage only to end up worse off. Sarcastic. When Qin Hao heard this, he smiled coldly and walked over with light step. He stared at Wu Lili's broken skull and said, "Of course it's ironic. I'm afraid that Zhan Wu would never have thought that the arrow would fall into my hands again one day." Only then did Wu Lili remember Qin Hao. He could not help but turn his eyes to look at Qin Hao's face. At this moment, Wu Lili's heart was filled with bitterness. He was one of the 3 divine guards of the combat emperor. How could he die in the hands of a young man? This was something that he had never thought would happen. At the same time, he was also full of doubts. In the end, he roared with all his strength, "Who are you?" To be able to pull out the sunset arrow unscathed. "Who exactly are you?" "Me?" Mu Yue dispersed her primordial qi and spoke shakily. She looked at the young man in front of her. Although his appearance had changed, his temperament was the same as before. When she woke up just now, she had already heard the conversation between Qin Hao and Wu Lili. The only person in the world who knew that his heart was on the right side was him. "Qin Hao. Yes, I'm back. It's been 600 years. Wei, I've let you down." Qin Hao stood in front of her and choked with sobs. I knew you would come back. How could this small valley of God stop you? That's why I've been looking for you like a madman. I sensed your aura in Western Liang, so I flew all the way here. But has it been 600 years? I'm so sleepy, a little tired. Mu Yue forced herself to stay conscious. She wanted to smile for Qin Hao, but her voice suddenly stopped. Then, she lost all her strength and fell towards Qin Hao. Her beautiful waterfall-like hair turned white in the blink of an eye. 600 years ago, she was tortured by time and corroded by the sunset arrow in her chest. Her injuries were far more serious than Qin Hao had imagined. Although she did not lose her life back then, Mu Yue's lifespan had been exhausted. However, the moment she fell into Qin Hao's arms, she was happy. Because she saw that Qin Hao was still alive. Although his appearance had changed, and he did not have Denda's monstrous cultivation, as long as Qin Hao was alive, Mu Yue was satisfied. As for herself, she did not care. Drip. The sound of a drop of water could be heard. It was like the sound of morning dew falling into a lake. When Mu Yu smiled happily and closed her eyes, a drop of sparkling and translucent water droplet flowed down from the corner of her eyes and floated above Qin Hao's head. This was an unusual water droplet. It looked weak, but it was full of vitality. Wei. However, Qin Hao was too lazy to care about the water droplet above his head. Although he knew what it was the tranquil nether water that he had been searching for. It was the final goal of his narrow escape into the catacombs. It was as precious as the red lotus fire. He had finally obtained it. However, Qin Hao only cared about the girl in his arms who was gradually losing her life. The girl whose hair was turning white. He kept calling her, but he could not get any response from her. Amidst Qin Hao's hysterical shouts, this world collapsed completely. The heavens and the earth merged together, and it transformed into an expanse of primitive chaos. The entrance to the outside world had completely collapsed. The outside world. There was a loud rumble and the earth shook. Hai Laosi and Xiaojun, who were guarding above, could not stand steadily and were thrown into the air. Immediately, they watched as the huge pit that was thousands of miles wide began to sink. Then, it was filled with soil from all directions. Xiaojun cried helplessly. Then, they would leave the Medicine Valley with a stalk of herb. That would be considered a pass. Qualified disciples signified that they had graduated and were granted the qualifications to roam the world. Therefore, the Medicine Valley was also considered as a graduation ceremony for the disciples of the 4 major schools. However, this ceremony was simply too difficult and cruel. The entrance to the Medicine Valley was between 2 mountains. Between these 2 mountains, the Luoshui Empire had artificially built a huge wall that was 50 meters high and 100 miles long. Each piece of stone weighed 1,000 kilograms. The top of the city wall was wide enough for 3 carriages to run side by side. The soldiers were equipped with heavy weapons. It could be said that this city wall could be said to be an iron bastion. If one wanted to forcefully break through it, one would have to pay a painful price to even break a piece of stone. On the city wall there was a forest of long spears. Every 3 steps there was a tall, heavily armored soldier. Every 10 meters there was a peak-level sky grandmaster among the soldiers. Every 100 meters there was a saint-level sky grandmaster. The densely packed sea of people stood on the city wall like a black line, forming a unique scenery. It was like a second wall on top of the city wall. It was a wall of martial strength built by human experts. The front of the city wall was watered with steel slurry and had sharp iron spikes protruding from it. These iron spikes, which gleamed with a cold light, were extraordinary. They were all made of 1,000-year-old cold iron and could easily pierce through the fur of sacred beasts. It was obvious how important this city wall was to the Luoshui imperial city and how sturdy it was. At this moment, on the platform behind the city wall, an old man in a plain gray robe stood there quietly with his hands behind his back. His calm eyes were looking at the disciples below the platform. However, no one noticed that deep in Yao Lao's eyes there was a trace of anxiety and worry. Chin chap, you couldn't have died, right? You disappeared for 2 months, and even I couldn't sense your presence. If you still don't appear, we will really lose our last chance to enter the Medicine Valley. Sigh. Yao Lao sighed. It wasn't that he didn't want to help, but that he couldn't. He had been to the Imperial Mausoleum in the eastern suburbs. The soil there was very special. Not only was it hard, but it had also returned to normal after it collapsed. Even though Yao Lao probed with his Yuan venerate consciousness, he couldn't sense Qin Hao's presence at all. This ugly old man who guards the medicine tower in the outer courtyard is actually the elusive vice president of our Scarlet Sun Martial Institution. I, Bai Lang, am truly shocked. If I had known earlier, I would have treated him more respectfully when I was still in the outer courtyard. Really? What a pity. I lost a chance to climb up his coattails, Bai Lang said regretfully. At the bottom of the platform, 9 Qiangbin disciples stood side by side. They were all in scarlet attire with a sacred image of the Scarlet Sun embroidered on their chests. The person in the middle was the chief disciple of the Scarlet Sun Inner Pavilion, Yi Wuhan. This was the first time Yi Wuhan had seen the deputy chief dean in person. Just like Bai Lang, he was very surprised. The other 2 Inner Pavilion disciples standing beside Yi Wuhan, Xianyuan Wuhuang and Duan Huolio, were also stunned. Compared to their surprise, Xiaogua and Lin Feng were much calmer. After all, Yao Lao had fought with the chief dean of Starmoon Academy during the Rising Star competition for Qin Hao. Xiaogua and Lin Feng glanced at each other tacitly and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. The list of people who were selected to enter the Medicine Valley this time was very strange. Excluding the 3 Inner Pavilion disciples. In terms of strength, although Nalan Li and Naransu had improved a lot in the past 2 months, there was still a gap between them and Tai Long and Fang Jinchang, who were ranked on the heaven list. What was strange was that the day before the team was to enter the Medicine Valley, Tai Long, Fang Jinchang, and Tan Yong all died suddenly and accidentally in the inner courtyard. As a last resort, they were temporarily replaced by Nalan Li, Naransu, and Bai Lang. Including Han Man, Lin Feng, Xiaogua, and the 3 Inner Pavilion disciples, there were exactly 9 people. What made Xiaogua puzzled was why Tai Long and Tan Yong died strangely on the same day. As a result, there was an accident with the team configuration. Also, in the team of 10 people, there was Qin Hao's name, but there was no Yi Shuihan's name. The deputy chief dean didn't give a spot to Yi Shuihan. Could it be? Big Brother didn't ask for a spot for Shuihan? Xiaogua thought so at first, but he denied it in the end. Since he could enter the Medicine Valley, with Yi Shuihan's identity and status, how could he not get a spot? There was something fishy going on. It's Han Man's honor to enter Qiangbin to witness the deputy chief dean's glory. It's a pity that Junior Qin Hao. Sigh. Han Man shook his head. He had heard about the collapse of the Imperial Mausoleum in the eastern suburbs. It was already a hot topic in the Luoshui Empire. It was most likely that Qin Hao had died. It was really a pity. When Xianyuan Wuhuang heard Han Man's words, he could not help but shake his head. He was also looking forward to Qin Hao's outstanding performance in the Medicine Valley. He had even teamed up with Qin Hao to fight against the other academies before the assessment, but now it had to be said that Qi Yang's team had lost a genius with amazing combat strength. Qin Hao? TSK. Bai Lang snorted and curled his lips. What can he do here? Even if he doesn't die, once he enters the Medicine Valley, he'll be beaten to a pulp by Mad Dragon, Star Moon, and Shifang. He'll have to kneel down and call me Grandpa. Bai Lang knew very well that Qin Hao had killed Ren Xiaoyao from Shifeng Academy in Dan Ji's alchemist competition. He had stolen Huang Tianba's family heirloom, the furnace of good fortune. Moreover, he had extorted 200,000 earth crystals from Yi Ziming from Star Moon Academy. It would have been fine if Qin Hao didn't come. But after he came, he was beaten to a pulp. In comparison, it was Qin Hao's honor to die early in the catacombs. After all, he wouldn't have to suffer Huang Tianba's revenge. That's right. Even if that ant didn't die, I would personally crush his bones and scatter his ashes to vent my hatred and comfort my brother, Duan Shuilio's soul in heaven. Duan Huilu roared like a wild beast in front of everyone. He had hoped that Qin Hao didn't die and entered the Medicine Valley with the team. That way, he could avenge his brother. He would make Qin Hao suffer a fate worse than death. However, Qin Hao had died early. Duan Huilu was lucky. When Bai Lang heard this, the arrogance on his face became even more unbridled. Qin Hao not only had enemies outside the academy, but he also had a natural enemy inside the academy. This kid was really tired of living by causing trouble everywhere. People like him, who were in the limelight, never had a good ending. Who asked Qin Hao to refine a king-grade pill that was even better than Bai Lang's alchemy skills. Therefore, Qin Hao deserved to die. Although my big brother isn't here, if you want revenge, come at me. Xiaogua will take it. Xiaogua's face darkened and he stared at Duan Huilu without fear. In the past 2 months, he and Lin Feng had received cruel training from the 10 elders of the inner court every day. They had also entered the pressure room to train and soaked their bodies in the blood pool of the inner court. His strength had improved by leaps and bounds. He didn't fear Duan Huilu at all. As a member of the Grand Alliance, Xiaogua had the responsibility to protect Qin Hao's dignity. You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. How dare you challenge senior brother Duan Huilu? You won't even know how you die when you enter the Medicine Valley. If I were you, I would curse Qin Hao 10,000 times and then kneel at senior brother Duan Huilio's feet and beg for his protection. Bai Lang said sarcastically. He also looked at Duan Huilu with a fawning look, meaning that as long as he was willing, Bai Lang was willing to serve him. Indeed, after entering the valley, I will kill you first, then I will kill Lin Feng, and then I will kill the 2 women. In short, I will kill everyone who is related to Qin Hao. I will kill them all. As for Bai Lang, you've done well. I allow you to be my follower. Duan Huilu replied fiercely and then patted Bai Lang's shoulder. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.